OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
And a very good morning to you. Welcome along to OTB AM. It's Ger and Eoin with you all the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. We'd love to hear from you. 0879 180 180. That's the WhatsApp number. You can send it a text. I'm not sure if Tommy reads them, but he probably does. Best to use WhatsApp, though. You know, that's how we roll these days. Eoin, I can't believe I turned my back for one day yesterday and you turned the entire airwaves over to the King of Mayo so that he could try and ramp the pressure up on the Dubs. What the hell happened?
Disgusting. Anti-Dublin bias seeping through on a Monday morning. Too soon to be able to do that sort of thing. This sort of compressed window that exists between the All-Ireland Hurling final and the All-Ireland football final. The Mayo people just simply won't have that. Nathan Murphy was like, hold on a minute. Clear the decks. I will not bow down to John Kiley and Graham Mulcahy and Declan Hannon, even though they're live in the show, even though we're going live to Crumlin. That is not going to get in my way. I'm going to step in and ensure that we get this big boulder to the top of the hill and start pushing it down on a Monday morning. Yeah,
Nathan hates charity. We know that. So any opportunity to take away from it. Just explain what actually happened for anybody who missed yesterday's show.
Well, our Gillette pressure rankings, which come to you every Monday morning, Nathan decided to hijack that and put 5 Mayo-related items in there. So the likes of the Hill 16 Army would have been in the pressure rankings yesterday. John Costello would have been in the pressure rankings yesterday. Only one Mayo person figured in the pressure rankings, and it was Kevin Kilban. So outside of that, it doesn't seem that there's any pressure on Mayo this week. All the pressure is on Dublin, their fans, their county board chairman, and Mayo can basically show up to Croke Park this Saturday evening pressure-free.
Yeah, I mean, it does raise the interesting question of what people actually want to happen for the future of the game this weekend. Another Dublin win in the short term is good for the long-term health of the game? Is that the argument that we're starting to hear?
Well, we've got 2 different factions who are going to meet somewhere in the middle with their pitchforks at around 6:30, 6:45 on Saturday night, and it's going to be interesting to see where the battle lines are drawn. On one side, you have people who have a blue-coloured pitchfork. They show up and stand in the hill in most summers, except for this summer, obviously, and they will actually be hoping that Mayo play really well. They will be hoping that Dublin get pushed to the pin of their collar and they just about scrape over the line. On the other side, you'll have people...
A Dean Rock winner in stoppage time at the end of the game. Perfect.
Correct, exactly. Something like 2017. On the other hand, you have people who envy those who stand in the hill every summer and they've got, you know, maybe green and gold pitchforks or maybe green and red pitchforks. And maybe not green and red, but every other county. They will actually be hoping for Dublin to destroy Mayo and win by 20 points on Saturday, even though they might be claimed to be anti-Dublin in their way of thinking. So
what's the logic to that?
Because if Dublin win by 20, then you can further your argument that Dublin need to be split in 2 or 4, whereas if Dublin win by a small margin, then that's it. Case closed. It's going to be about, you know, splitting Limerick maybe in the hurling, but certainly we can't talk about Dublin anymore.
I never said about splitting Limerick, and then look at the winning now. And the Kilkenny lads, you never said about splitting them neither.
And the JP money and all that, that's all going to come into play. So it's interesting, there will be a lot of conflicted emotions about what happens on Saturday, because there is a big insecurity, I would imagine, about actually celebrating Dublin hammering everybody at the moment. Not like, I think it's pretty clear, but I don't know, it's just a very strange culture war that seems to have broken out a little bit over the last few weeks, that everybody... this whole thing just has a subtext of Dublin's power and the long-term future of Dublin's power, and the relevance of this year's championship is a little bit tainted by that, I think.
I do feel like this is the type of red rag to a bull scenario where some of the greatest players of all time who have proven themselves to be elite in their preparation and their learning and their skill sets, acquisition, and their ability to play the game of football, some of those players are now feeling like their achievements are being tainted by people not giving them enough credit. The greatest team of all time feels like they're not getting enough credit for being the greatest team of all time. What do you think their response is going to be to that? How will they respond? What does history show us? That the great sports people who somehow feel, do we think they might take it personally? Is that what's going to happen this weekend? Are we going to see the Dubs? Is Conor Callaghan going to take it personally? Brian Fenton maybe take it a little bit personally, that everybody's saying that they only won because of the money and the funding?
Well, what's going to happen is Conor Callaghan will be bearing down on goal. Dublin will be 12 points up, and he'll be like, God, if I put us 15 points up now, I'll be playing on a different team to Brian Fenton next year. I'll be playing for South Dublin and he'll be playing for North Dublin. I'm going to fist this over the bar and win the game by 13 points and save the future of the single Dublin team.
I still think that the best chance that the whole of the football country has is that the best Dublin hurlers play hurling for Dublin. So Conor Callaghan, Kieron Kilkenny, Costello, if they were all to just disappear and start playing for the hurling, and we know what the attitude of the football has traditionally been to dual players, although they might make an exception for Con. Anyway, look, the point of this was to try and power rank Mayo's greatest defeats of the last decade.
Yeah, we got sidetracked a little bit.
Yeah.
It's been one hell of a decade, hasn't it? Like, you look, it's certainly that 5-year period between 2012 and 2017. Like, I don't want to make this risky prediction just yet, but I don't think Mayo will ever go through as painful a 5-year period as that. I know that is saying something, but even by Mayo standards, those 5 years were incredible. Let's just set the menu here for a quick reminder of how things went for them during those 6 seasons, actually. So 2012, Jimmy's winning matches. Michael Murphy scores that goal against Mayo in an All-Ireland final. Mayo go down. Maybe you could say that actually Jimmy was going to win matches that year regardless of who was coming up against him, and there was little that Mayo could do. 2013 then, they're back in the final again. This time it's Brogan scoring goals and Mayo go down, and they only lose that final by a point. They lost by 4 points to Donegal the previous year. It's only a point against Dublin in 2013. They're getting closer. In 2014, it looks like they're going to be back in the final again. They're a man down against Kerry. They're 5 points up against Kerry, but they still managed to draw that game. Everybody talks about Limerick, and I'm sure Mayo people everywhere will remember actually that Croke Park was really where that day was lost. On the other side of the coin that year, Dublin got beaten. The opportunity of actually taking down that Dublin team, which in fairness Mayo probably would have fancied doing themselves because it was a chaotic version of Dublin. It had been done on the other side of the semi-final, but Mayo somehow found a way to not get past Kerry. 2015 then, we remember, was the drawn game, the Diarmuid Connolly suspension game. Dublin win the replay comfortably, but that drawn game is one that'll stick in the craw of Mayo fans and definitely has over the last 5 years. 2016 then, 2 own goals. For me, this is number 1 on the list without question. And then 2017 is GPS Gate. It's one of the best finals of all time. It was a game that we actually thought could be the straw that broke the camel's back of Dublin finally hammering a team in an All-Ireland final and finally beating Mayo comfortably. And there were times in that game where you thought it might happen, but then Lee Keegan came out of nowhere and scored one of the great goals in an All-Ireland final, and in my opinion, one of the best finals we've ever seen. So you pick through all of that and try and figure out which is the worst. As I say, 2016 has to be number 1. The 2 own goals just has to be number 1. A close second would have to be 2017. I think that performance was just so good. It did deserve an All-Ireland win. And I think Dublin, actually, if you're talking about not giving Dublin enough credit, I think maybe Dublin deserve a bit more credit for how they performed in 2017 as well. And Dean Rock in particular for actually nailing that free.
Sorry, the 2016, we've kind of glossed over it. The 2 own goals was in a drawn game.
And the replay was pretty close. I'm using 2016 as a whole here.
Sorry, that was in a drawn game. In the replay, they lost by a point.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing. I'm not laughing. It's nervous laughter. It's a like we're watching an unfolding tragedy very slowly at glacier pace. We're revisiting it, then we're picking at the scab, and we're feeding it to you for breakfast, Mayo people. We're sorry about this. We really are. It wasn't our intention. It's Nathan Murphy's fault for seizing the airwaves yesterday and trying to make up, ratcheted pressure up on Dublin. Own goals and a replay. I just have to put this down here. Text us which of these was the most painful of the memories for you to revisit. GPS Gate, like, that was peak Dublin, like them at their best. It's not really a sin to lose to them, is it?
No, definitely not. And as I say, I think Dublin do deserve more credit for the way they performed in that final. But I just think it was possibly also Mayo's best performance in the final as well in 2017, and they just came up short on that occasion. And there was a missed free as well, wasn't there, right before Dean Rock nailed his. So, like, maybe that game goes to a replay, and that's just another one of the drawn games that Dublin end up getting over the line in the semi-final. But I still think that one will go down as... I think that was the one where the whole country really thought that this could be it. This is finally the moment where Mayo are going to do it, and they just didn't. So in third place, it'll be 2014 for me. In second place, it'll be 2017. And in first place, the most painful of all, will be 2016. They're all very painful, though.
Is the year, though, of the replay against Kerry, is that not the bit where a Donegal team who, granted, have already won All-Ireland and so, you know, have beaten you in an All-Ireland final, might have had a little bit of hoodoo over them, but get beaten by Kerry and, like, are a very beatable team? Is that not the one that actually... they're thinking, if the American football wasn't on, if it was on in Croker.
Yeah, or if they just hadn't blown their lead the first day, if they just hadn't let James O'Donoghue sneak along at the back post. Like I definitely think that year, 2014, would be third on the list.
Is 2014, when's the game when Cillian O'Connor and Aidan O'Shea concuss each other in an accident?
That is 2014, isn't it? That is 2014. So that's all part of it. That's all part of the draw against Kerry, the Limerick game, and then seeing Donegal actually win on the other side of the draw. I think that all feeds into the pain of that year. And James Horan steps away after that, which, like, obviously they've gone so close in the non-James Horan eras, and obviously there was a lot of controversy around Holmes and Kennelly and the way they left their job, but they still got him back to within a whisker of an All-Ireland final the year after. And Stephen Rossford obviously is a brilliant manager as well, who came in after that. But I don't know, would James Horan hanging in for one more year, would that have been the difference in 2015? Like, I don't know, but I still think him stepping away after that was probably a bitter pill to swallow for them, but it just took such a toll that year, I'd imagine.
Sorry, I'm reading about the 2016 All-Ireland Championship. This is so painful. So Dublin 2-9, Mayo 15 points. The 2 goals that Dublin scored were scored by Mayo, right? So essentially Dublin kicked 9 points and got a draw, right? Yeah. In the replay, it's 115 to 114, 6 minutes of stoppage time played, and the referee blows his whistle to give a free in to Mayo. Cillian O'Connor misses it. Yeah, from the left sideline, isn't it? It's a free that we've seen him score more than anybody else has ever scored. And, does that free go over with no fans there this weekend? Maybe. So we're asking you to rank the pain. It's a flash poll. It's up now at Off the Ball. Which was Mayo's most heartbreaking loss of the past decade? Yeah, if you think we don't know our Mayo pain, then feel free to hit us up. The hashtag is OTB AM. Have we done a bad thing, Eoin? I'm sorry to everybody in Mayo. I'm also sorry to Dublin. I'm sure that there will be Dublin people out there who'll be like, it's not Mayo pain, it's all about Dublin greatness, and that's the reason why that was suffered. I just want to... You laughed at me when I was saying that the Mayo team deserved to be talked about as one of the all-time great teams, and that they should be up there in that conversation with the Kerry team of the noughties and the Tyrone team of the noughties. Obviously, Tyrone were the team of the noughties, but this Mayo team are right there with them. They are right there with them, because look at how close they were to winning 3 or 4 All-Irelands. Like, that's, I mean, and they've come up against literally the greatest team of all time, who have all the advantages, more advantages than any other team has ever had in history. And Mayo are the only ones who have proven to be a decent rival. I would actually argue that if Mayo had won one of those, it would have been better for Dublin in the long run, because we would have thought of Dublin as an even better team, because Mayo were All-Ireland winners. And, you know, as your rival is perceived, that sharpens your own legacy. I think that when you look at that, and the fact that they keep coming back, and they're back for more this weekend, that's heroic stuff. Yeah, I definitely agree on the heroic part, whether or not they're one of the greatest teams of all time. I just can't go along with that. I just can't classify anybody as one of the greatest teams of all time unless they've won an All-Ireland. It's a very harsh way of looking at it, because they have been brilliant, and they have definitely been the team that have pushed the greatest team of all time very, very closest. But you have to win one to be in that conversation. 7:44 this morning. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Here's what's coming up on the morning ahead for you. Daniel Harris standing by. We're going to talk to him in just a moment. Sports pages at 8:05. We'll talk a little bit of Kerry pain. Matty Williams is going to join us at 8:15 to talk to us about the rugby at the weekend and next weekend. And of course, Ireland's draw, where it looks like we ain't getting past the quarter-final again in the next World Cup. A new movie out called The Racer talks about the Festina affair and Dublin's relationship with that. Antrim Hurling, Neil McManus is going to join us 9:10. And Brian O'Driscoll, his reaction to the Rugby World Cup draw from 9:30 this morning as well. If you want to get in touch, 0879 180 180 is the number. And so we'll go to football with Daniel Harris, because there are lots of things for us to get our teeth stuck into. And I think that the first thing that we should be getting our teeth stuck into at the moment is Mikel Arteta. As an Arsenal fan, Owen, before we get to Daniel Harris, do you want a new Arsenal head coach now, or do you want to watch how this slow train crash unfolds and see what the damage is before you get your new head coach? Yeah, I want to see what the damage is. I want to see where the train crashes before everybody just hops off and lets it burn slowly into a fireball, which is looking like it might inevitably happen.
I don't think this team is going to get relegated for a start. I think some of the melodrama around it is a little bit OTT, that there is an opportunity for him to turn it around. But he has made some very suspect decisions, especially when it comes to his relationships, or the relationships he's chosen to have with some of the players. We don't know for sure what's going on behind the scenes, but it doesn't look like great man management that you would bestow such amazing faith in someone like Granit Xhaka and can't look sideways at Mesut Ozil. It just doesn't sit right with me. I don't think it makes any sense. I think that there was a lot of writing on the wall when it came to this particular player in the past, and it was just very curious that he would slam, rightfully, someone like Nicolas Pepe for his red card a couple of weeks ago, and then sort of be okay with Granit Xhaka in the press after his red card at the weekend, when everybody knows that he is a complete and utter liability. So I think there's just been a little bit of inconsistency in his man management, which is very, very worrying.
Okay, Daniel Harris is with us. Daniel, what's your take on what's going to happen with Mikel Arteta? Because you were tweeting the other day that essentially it's a dream scenario for him to come in where there's not that much expectation, and all of a sudden he's managed to turn that dream into a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, I think that he got an unbelievable opportunity, because there wasn't a lot of pressure on results at all when he got the job, because Arsenal weren't going to qualify for the Champions League and they weren't going to go down. So what I expected him to do was to take 6 months to have a look at the squad and to just quite quickly actually think, well, identify which players he felt he could go forward with and which players he felt may or may not be good players, but that weren't going to fit where he was going to go. So the best example, I think, is Alexandre Lacazette, who is an all right player. He's not terrible, but he's quite old, he's quite slow, and seemed to me like precisely the kind of player that Arteta was going to not require going forward, because where Arsenal want to get to, Lacazette is not going to take them there. And I thought that he would probably be frozen out, more or less, or used as a substitute. But he played loads at the end of last season, and he's still playing loads now. I think the same with Granit Xhaka is another one. Arteta was given every excuse to never have to look at him again, and he brought him back. And I understand that he may have felt that he didn't have better players in the club at the time, but the point wasn't really about at the time. The point was about building something to go somewhere. And Arteta hasn't really done that at all. And I'm absolutely certain that the board are desperate not to sack him, because they only sacked Unai Emery just over a year ago, and they put all their eggs in the Arteta basket. But when you actually break down the appointment of Arteta, it is absolutely baffling. And I totally understand why they did it. He was someone they felt was Arsenal. He played for Arsenal, but the reality is that he wasn't even a good player at Arsenal particularly. He was an all right player. They panic bought at the end of a transfer window, who did okay, who wasn't a terrible player, just wasn't a particularly good player. So he doesn't have the cachet to attract players to the club. He doesn't have the aura to inspire people who care about the club, and he doesn't have any experience. So he'd been assistant to Pep Guardiola, but being assistant to Pep Guardiola at Manchester City, the richest club perhaps in world football, maybe the second richest club at world football, who buy players and players and players and players, and not only that, but who were putting in place a structure for Guardiola in terms of the players, the men around him, and also the players that they were buying for years before Guardiola arrived. That is not similar to turning up at Arsenal and being dumped in the middle of that squad on your own. And there is no reason to think that he was going to be able to do this. He might be able to do it because lots of people think Arteta's good. Lots of people that know Arteta personally think that he's good. But the most anyone could really say about Arteta was no idea. When Josh Kroenke appointed him, and he must have gone home and said to his mum, "I've appointed a new manager of Arsenal," and his mum would have said, "Is he any good?" And Kroenke, the best he could have done would be, "I don't know." And that's really what we're seeing. Like, the Arsenal job was a huge job. They're an absolute mess. They had some really good young players, but most of them weren't ready yet. They had some decent-ish old players, and then a lot of nonsense in the middle. And he didn't take the time to weed out the quality from the nonsense when he had it. And now that's what we're seeing now is a consequence of that bad decision, I think.
How do we know that he can't attract good players as a result of a mediocre playing career? Because there's only really been one opportunity for him to go out and sign a big player, and it was when Kroenke wrote the cheque for Thomas Partey on transfer deadline day, and he went out and got him. Like, is there evidence out there to suggest that players have actually turned down Arsenal because of Arteta?
I'm not saying that he can't. That like no good player is going to sign for Arsenal. What I'm saying is, players signing for Arsenal because of Mikel Arteta, or players being inspired because of Mikel Arteta, his playing career is not going to achieve that, which means he's got to do a lot of salesmanship. I mean, the most obvious comparison, and it's not a similar scenario to the one Ole Gunnar Solskjaer inherited at United, because Ole's just got way better players and more money. And so if you're going to compare the two, you would have to make that obvious non-comparison that makes them a non-comparison. But Ole has some cachet that Arteta doesn't have. So if you're a Manchester United centre-forward and you're being coached how to finish by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, or if you're a striker and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer says, I will help you work on your finishing, or whatever it might be, there is a level of aura and a level of cachet there. Like quite early on when things went really well under Ole, Marcus Rashford's finishing was something that he said he'd been working on. And I remember Rashford tweeted a picture of a mortarboard hat and him and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, for example. Now, that kind of stuff won't necessarily work in the long term, and it may even be a load of nonsense in the short term. But it's there that you're being managed by a club legend. So if you're bothered about United, then you could find it in yourself to find Ole Gunnar Solskjaer inspirational. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was also a really good player. And if he plays in your position, again, you could think, well, he's actually got a lot to teach me about how to play my role. And I'm just saying that Arteta doesn't have that. It doesn't mean that he can't sign good players. If you pay enough for them, you can sign good players. But what I'm saying is he doesn't bring any additional aura or cachet on top of the cachet that Arsenal have or don't have, depending on what you think about Arsenal.
Did they not kind of have that with Freddie Ljungberg when he took over from Unai Emery and things didn't exactly get that much better? Granted, it was only a few weeks, but I think there wasn't actually a noticeable improvement under him. The players didn't seem to respond to one of the great wingers that Arsenal have had in the last 20 years. I'm just not sure how a mediocre playing career is going to hold him back as a great manager. I get the idea of the appeal, potentially.
Isn't the issue that he's not a great manager?
I'm not saying it's not going to hold him back if he's a great manager, but when you look at managers, they all bring different things, right? And Arteta, I'm just saying that there's quite a long list of things Arteta does not bring. So he's got no managerial experience. That's obviously the biggest one. And to then be there's no other industry in the world almost where someone with Arteta's level of experience will get the top job at an Arsenal-sized institution. So he doesn't have cachet, he doesn't have aura, he doesn't have experience. So when you could identify one of those and go, well, he had that and he didn't work, or he didn't have that. But when you put them all together and you put together the mess at Arsenal, it's not a recipe for success. That's what I'm saying. So, and again, we're talking about Ole. So if you look at Ole didn't have lots of experience, but United appointed him after he'd done a stint of actually doing that job. And he'd also managed at Mould, and people laugh at that, but he'd taken a team that never won the league in its history, in like 90 years or something, history, to 2 league titles. So there is some level of experience there that makes you think he has got some ability to do this job. Whereas with Arteta, what is the evidence that he was able to do this job? What is it?
Well, none. I mean, he's been an assistant to Pep, and so you hope that he's touched the hem of the garment of the genius. So what do Arsenal do now, though? Because Edu's come out and backed him, and so, okay, that maybe that lasts 2 or 3 weeks if results don't pick up. They're currently 5 points clear of Fulham, who are propping up at the top of the relegation table at the moment. Do they have to just give him time and ride this season out and hope that there is enough managerial genius in there to recover from this? Or is it a lost cause? Like, at what point does it become a lost cause?
I don't think it's a lost cause. I mean, I think the problem with Arsenal ultimately is their ambition as a club is not matched by their ambition in the boardroom, because the best measurement, the best indicator of which club's going to do well is how much money they spend. And Arsenal aren't prepared to spend the money that the rest of the clubs are going to spend, and they don't happen to have the natural resources that a lot of other clubs have at this time. So if you look at United, for example, they also have owners who want to take money out and not put money in. It just so happens that they've got 2 brilliant centre forwards produced by the youth system. So it's not a coincidence, because obviously the measures were put in place to do that. But when that happens, you suddenly have money that you can spend. The money that you can spend in other areas, because the most crucial part of any football team, scoring goals, is not totally taken care of, but you've got two players that cost you nothing that are good at attacking. So Mason Greenwood and Marcus Rashford. Arsenal didn't have that. And so you look at Arsenal's squad and think, in order to get into the top four, in order to challenge for the title, what is it going to take? And how on earth are they going to get there? And they could have any manager in the world who would be struggling to make something decent out of this squad. But at the same time, under Arteta, it's not really possible to be doing any worse with this squad. And so that's the tension. I think that I'm absolutely certain that the board want to stick with Arteta, and he'll get much more slack than Unai Emery did, and much more slack than almost every other manager did, because they will understand that they were taking a gamble. If you give someone who's never managed a job, then you've got to assume they're going to be learning as they go. And when Pep Guardiola got the job at Barcelona, he had maybe the greatest player ever and almost definitely the greatest midfield ever, and that sort of eases your way in slightly. But if you parachute someone into a mess, then you've got to expect them to take time to sift through it. So I'm not sure that they'll keep him, because things could still get worse from here. But like Southampton, I think they're playing Southampton tomorrow night. That's a difficult game. I mean, you would back Southampton to take care of that. If they lose again and again and again, then they might have to do something. But I definitely think he'll get quite a bit more rope, because what are they going to do next? Like, who are you going to go and get now? And what is that person that they're going to do now going to make of the squad that they inherit? And also, if Arsenal to go and sack Arteta and point, say, Allegri's not going to be happy with this squad, and he's going to want money, whereas Arteta is presumably more grateful for the opportunity and therefore less demanding.
Yeah, it's not a great scenario for the Arsenal fans in our midst. I did want to ask you about Manchester United and City at the weekend. It's the perfect get-right fixture for City. They've got West Brom, Manchester United or Sheffield United away. So not a bad sequence of games to come back from the match at the weekend. What was your take on the derby and why it ended up not being as entertaining or interesting a game as it could have been?
I think that for both clubs, the managers decided that they would prefer not to lose. And I think that every fan of every club, you want to go and see your team go for it, particularly in a derby game. But I think the way they would have looked at it is that, I mean, for United, for example, if they beat the bottom club on Thursday, the worst case scenario with the point that they got against City is that they'll be 5 points off the top with a game against Burnley in hand at the end of Thursday night if they can beat the bottom club. That's a pretty good place to be in. And I think that much as a supporter, I would like to have seen Ole go wild and try and win the game. If it was my responsibility and my job that was on the line, I can see why in that circumstance you deem a defeat more damaging than a win was rewarding. I think my problem with it is more in a wider sense. When Ole got the job, even when he was caretaker, he started making some quite bold decisions about the players that he liked and how he wanted United to play. Like, it was really clear that he didn't fancy Lukaku. And whether you do or you don't agree with that, it showed that there was a particular way of playing and he wanted to play that particular way. Similarly, he started picking Jesse Lingard because even though he wasn't the quality of player that he wanted someone quick and fast playing at the top of midfield. But since then, he's actually become much more negative and much less ruthless. And what we're finding is he keeps playing it safe when he's got an opportunity, and he keeps going back to players like De Gea, Matic, Pogba. He knows they're going to let him down, and he knows aren't going to take him where he wants to go. So in terms of the little picture and what he did, I understand. In terms of the big picture, it's starting to become a bit frustrating, the unnecessary caution. But as I said at the beginning of this answer, if United beat Sheffield United on Thursday, there might be 5 points off the top. There might be 3 points off the top, I think, if there's a draw in the Liverpool-Spurs game. So they're actually in a pretty good position. The problem is whether they've got the ability and the moxie and the momentum to actually do anything about it.
Has Solskjaer got better at his job over the last couple of months?
I don't know about over the last couple of months, but you would definitely hope he'd got better at the job over the last couple of years, really. I mean, I remember reading an interview with Nemanja Matic during last season that said he was a miles better manager now than he was then. I think what he has to do now is he has to settle on a way of playing, because that's the only way you're going to get the attacking and defensive cohesion that is required, and the team are going to be just performing in concert. At the moment, they don't really attack and defend like a team, because in every game the formation changes and the personnel change. and it's not possible to get the cohesion that you need, even under Fergie. When United won the league in 2007, they ended up getting battered in the Champions League semi-final by Milan because basically the team were knackered and they had a lot of injuries. Now, and that is, to me, like, when I look at the time under Fergie, that's one of the European Cups that got away. I felt like United were the best team around that season, but by the time the end of the season came, they were spent, and they ended up limping over the line in the league and getting beaten in the cup final in a very low-key manner by Chelsea. So what happened that summer was Fergie went out and he bought Anderson and he bought Nani and he bought Owen Hargreaves. And then he had a squad that he could rotate. I'm not sure the cohesion was ever the same in the next 2 years and more of title winning, but it meant that they didn't tire at the end of the season and they were getting to European Cup finals. And that was with a great team. And what we're seeing with Ole is that he's changing a not great team, and they're not reproducing the cohesion that they have when there's a consistency of selection and he's picking his best players to go out and play. Now, this is a strange season, so you do need to do some level of rotation, but when you're rotating a handful of players every time and you're also rotating formation, that's not the best way of making it work. And it would be more sensible if you're rotating a couple of players and they're always playing the same way. And what the right way to play is obviously dependent on how you think United should play. For my part, I think that the best way of maximising the strengths and minimising the weaknesses is probably a diamond, because I don't think they've got the wide players to play 4-3-3, and they also need to protect the defence. So if you play a diamond, you've got 4 narrow midfield players, which means you can play 2 attacking midfield players with 2 strikers and have 2 players who are going to help you protect what you know to be a dodgy defence. So if I were him, which I'm not, for the avoidance of doubt, I would settle on that way of playing and then just get on with it and rotate 2, maximum 3 players in and out every game. But every game, unless it was a very special occasion, the players would know how they were going to be playing and what was expected of them.
Last question on this, because Mino Raiola, funny enough, talking again, says to Tutto Sport, when it comes to in England, they're sensitive, perhaps too sensitive. In January, the big players hardly move. Then in the summer, let's see what happens. So Pogba's sticking around on his way out, but sticking around until summertime. It looks like almost guaranteed at this point. You play him as often as you possibly can, because he needs to play well and he needs to boost his value, and he needs to, this now becomes where it's mutually beneficial for him to play well to get the move that he wants, so he gets an opportunity to pick what club he goes to.
I think, yeah, like you would expect Pogba to, if he was getting picked, to play, but the kind of player that Pogba isn't going to change. So you're going to have some all right performances, the occasional really good performance, and some absolutely terrible performances. There's nothing has changed in what Raiola has said that's going to alter the person that Paul Pogba is. And it's not just about the player that he is, because the player that he is a reflection of the person that he is. And he doesn't come across as someone who loves competing at professional football. He loves football. I'm absolutely sure he loves football, and he loves training, and he's in unbelievable shape all the time. So I'm not saying that Paul Pogba but Paul Pogba's put in an unbelievable amount of work to be the footballer and athlete that Paul Pogba is, but he lacks the intensity to be someone you can rely on every week in the kind of team that United are. So if United keep picking him, they're just going to see more of the same. If you went and put Pogba in a perfect team where he was just the guy who was going to do the occasional brilliant thing, then that would be great. And Paul Pogba would be great in that aspect, but United need more from him than that. And so if they keep picking him, they're going to keep having the same complaints. He's played all right in the last couple of games. He played all right when he came on against Leipzig, and he played all right against City. Like not well enough, but he played okay. But there's no reason to think that now he realises he might have to, in order to earn the move that he wants, that may or may not be available in January, it's better for him if he's playing to get a better deal. I don't think that is going to flick a switch in Paul Pogba, because none of the other things have flicked a switch in Paul Pogba, and it's just who Paul Pogba is. And I don't think that is particularly suitable for what United are trying to get to at the moment. Okay. So I would much rather see more of Donny van de Beek. And maybe Donny van de Beek isn't either, but at least we don't know. Whereas we know with Pogba. Yeah. We know that United can't build with Pogba, and we know that
he's on his way out as well. Yeah, good stuff. Daniel Harris, thanks a million. Cheers.
See you again, lads. Bye.
4 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTB AM. Still to come, Matt Williams is going to join us this hour. We'll be chatting to Kieron J. Walsh about The Racer, the new movie that's out. Up next, we've got Tuesday's Sports Pages.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
Bet smart this season with stat betting on the Boyle Sports app. Bet on shots, shots on target, tackles, passes, assists and more, all powered by Opta. Plus, put your feet up and cheer your bets home with free live streaming on every UK and Irish horse race. Why not check out the hottest action on the biggest sporting events right now on the Boyle Sports app. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Need help? Contact gamblingcare.ie. 18+.
The Saturday panel on OTB.
I've watched a few of The Last Dance, mostly sports. I just find it fascinating. You're never satisfied with what he did. And I think anybody watching it, young kids watching it, whatever sports they're in, to see the attitude that he had and his approach to his profession was absolutely brilliant.
Don't miss the panel every Saturday afternoon on OTB Sports Radio. Tune in 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Well, for me, the absolute dread was when you'd walk down to the dressing rooms or wherever we were going to meet you, and we were after being beaten, and just to see your faces. And that first initial meeting was just, was heartbreaking, really. And it went on for years with Alan and with you as well. Oh, we'd get so far, and then the disappointment, and it was just savage. I mean, and that initial meeting, that first few minutes when you'd walk out the dressing room, for me, it was just heartbreaking.
And those are the days when we didn't, let's say, get on a bus and you'd come out on a bus. I remember Alan used to walk down the Jones's Road with your Dublin bag on your back, and you'd meet the family down the road. What was it like for you when you were obviously listening to it in the stand? Alan was probably keeping his head down when he was playing, but what was it like for you, being so involved with Dublin GA?
Oh, no, it was so disappointing, it's sort of, because, in a way, there was so much expectation and impetus in the team. Like, in the start of the 90s, we weren't really winning it, and, then we started winning Leinsters, and then we were getting there very close. We didn't play in our first All-Ireland final since 1995 was 2011. So that just shows we spent a lot of years where we expected so much and got so little. But that's what this game is about. Statistically, as long as you were playing, there was a good chance we were going to win in All-Ireland. So that was always there. Like, other counties don't have that, where they don't get to the All-Ireland as frequently as Dublin. Yeah. Dublin has got the All-Ireland every decade since the start of the GAA, except in the noughties.
Yeah, well, I used to look at that, and as it hit 2006, 2007, I say to myself, right, Dublin have won an All-Ireland every decade. Like, there's no way it's going to be this decade that we won't win. Unfortunately, it was that decade that we didn't win it.
It was just
on our watches, they say, yeah.
Into sports.
20 yards out, Irish to shoot. Duggan! Oh, what a goal for Fabinho! Wow!
Then get into the all-new OTB Sports app.
I think when he apologises to me, I probably will say hello to him, yeah. No.
Videos, sports news, live scores, interviews.
If Fabregas is going to come up to me in the street and give me some of the mouth that he would have given me on a football pitch, what do you do? You get a slap?
Plus, exclusive content on the OTB Podcast Network. The biggest names in sports. Ready when you are. Search OTB Sports on your app store and download it now.
Follow the leader, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, the world's best-selling plug-in hybrid, is now available with 0% finance and a free home charge point worth €800. Leading the charge in plug-in hybrid technology, the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV. Book a test drive at your local dealer today. Mitsubishi, drive your ambition. Terms and conditions apply. See MitsubishiMotors.ie. Lending criteria applies. This is a hire purchase agreement provided by Bank of Ireland Finance.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
It's 9 minutes past 8 this morning. At the start of the show, we did something egregious. We picked over the carcass of the last decade or so, what it's been like to be a Mayo football fan, and you have responded with your texts and tweets. I'll get to those in just a moment, but obviously I want to remind you, in the ad break there, you would have heard a clip from the latest episode of The Brogans. Bernard Senior, Maria, Paul and Alan joined Bernard this Wednesday for episode 5 of the Bernard Brogan podcast, available from 12 o'clock in the OTB GAA podcast stream. Subscribe and you'll find the first 4 episodes of the series with Ty Kennelly, Tommy Bowe, Shane Lowry and Jack McCaffrey. It's all brought to you thanks to SuperValu, proud sponsors of the 2020 All-Ireland Football Championship. Use the hashtag support where you're from. So Mayo Pain rankings, people have been WhatsApping us 0879 180 180. 2017, the pain still runs deep. Best game I was ever at. Easy to say now, I'd forgotten this. But if Donny Vaughan had kept his head, not stupidly dived in. We could have held out with 15 men. So were Dublin already down to 14?
They were momentarily down to 14 versus Mayo's 15. Sorry, they were down to 14 anyway, because in that same incident, John Small had been sent off. So Donny Vaughan reacted to the incident that got John Small sent off by getting himself a red card.
Right.
If he had not reacted, then it just would have been Small walking off. I'm talking from memory here, but I'm pretty sure that's how it developed, which you knew when it happened, this was going to be significant. Or one of those, loads of those moments happen in games and you're thinking to yourself, well, this could be the thing that ends up costing you, or that'll be significant come the end, and it often never really is. With that, it did feel that kind of cost Mayo that All-Ireland, which is obviously heartbreaking. And when you try and get yourself up to play Dublin, when you know that it's going to be 82,000 people in Croke Park and you've got a massive famine to end, you want the blood coursing through you, but at that moment it just ran a little bit too hot, I think, and I'm sure he'll regret that for a long time.
There was a point in the difference in the end in that game. That was,
GPS, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the winner with Dean Rock, right? There's 2 red cards in that game. GA media the better for having Mayo in the conversation. That's undoubtedly true, says Pete in Knockmore. Cork hold the greatest gap between All Irelands, 1911 to 1945. Maybe that changes come Saturday. As for the class of 2020, I would like to point out that all this Mayo team are underage again next year. Hashtag Terminator, hashtag we'll be back. It's a good point, yeah. They certainly seem ready for road. 2013, they should have won the All-Ireland. They threw it away. Jeez, I can't even remember. Remind me, 2013 again?
Dublin, Brogan's goal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That was swashbuckling Dublin at their most buckling of the swash.
You wanted to get Dublin in the chaos. Well, no, they're not the chaos years. The chaotic version of Jim Gavin's Dublin is what you wanted to get. You needed to get them before 2014. Otherwise, it ain't happening, and I fear that that's going to be the same thing this weekend.
Yeah. Right, 2013, they should have won the All-Ireland. They should have broken goals. Dublin cynicism in the last 10 minutes. Tommy's typing into my ear here. Was that the year of the... No.
That was, I think, 2017 was the coordinated one after Dean Roxbury. I think. It could be 2016, but I think it was 2017.
Right. So a few newspaper headlines for you here very briefly before we get to Matt Williams in about 3 minutes' time. AFL's O'Connor, I'd have been available for Munster final. So we talk about Mayo's pain rankings, but Kerry's pain rankings are right up there as well when you consider the fact that even when they were at their greatest, people still bang on about Tyrone being a better team than them. Fast forward to the modern day, and they've had to sit and watch the Dubs become undoubtedly the greatest team of all time, even better than their greatest team in the 80s was. And now it turns out that if they just got over Cork, they'd have had Mark O'Connor. Tell me what type of player Mark O'Connor is.
Midfielder. Brilliant midfielder, can do a bit of everything really.
Could have matched Brian Fenton. Him and Jack Barry, the kryptonite.
Yeah. I've always said that him going to Australia was one of the biggest blows that Kerry are ever going to suffer, or at least in this period of time, because I'd be a big fan of David Moran and how brilliant he's been for Kerry, but he's into his 30s now, and I know Mark O'Connor's going to be 24 next year. It would have been a nice little dovetailing of their careers where he would have been coming to his peak as David Moran perhaps is going to win in whatever a couple of years' time. So it's something without this story that you would feel a little bit of pain about. But on this occasion, it's just kind of like, God, what even happened? Why wasn't he there for the game in the first place? And for the Cork game, he was quarantining. And
yeah, but even the dates. So the grand final was on October the 24th, and Kerry played in Páirc Uí Chaoimh on November the 8th. There's definitely 14 days, just about. If they could have taken him off the pitch, put him in a cellophane bubble, put him on a private jet and flown him back at that point, Kerry had the money to do this.
Well, the thing is, they weren't expected to lose to Cork, so they were definitely planning for beyond that game. Let's face it. That's exactly what happened here. Nobody thought that they would actually lose that game, so they were 100% planning for what happens after this game, even though it was a knockout championship.
087 918 180 if you want to tease out any more of Owen's pain rankings there. Or indeed, if you're from Mayo and you'd like to tell us which of the All-Irelands that you lost in the last decade was the most painful, we'd love to hear from you this morning. Speaking of losing, let's talk about Ireland and Rugby World Cups. Matt Williams, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, Jay. Good morning, Alan. Really good, mate. Really good. Nice to talk to you.
So the World Cup draw gets made and Ireland get the Springboks. We knew we were going to get one of the top nations because obviously we were in the second pool this time. Springboks, fair enough, that's okay. And then the draw gets made for who you play in the quarterfinals, and it's France at home or it's New Zealand. Do we start our planning for the World Cup in 2027 now and just blah 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 away the 2023 one? Is that what happens? Is that how we?
Well, mate, there's one way to look at it. We've got nothing to lose. Because that's, I read this little article put out saying that there was no easy draws, and you compare that to Australia's draw, who have drawn Wales in Pool C, and if they win that, which they should, they'd face Argentina, which obviously Argentina or Japan, but I would suspect Argentina. And that's a much, much easier task to a semi-final than what Ireland have got. Ireland have got, a mountain. That is very, very tough. Very, very tough, yeah.
Because your reward for beating the Springboks is still going to be New Zealand or France. It's like, well, what do you do? Do you rest up for this? I don't know. I mean, look, we're very far away from this, but it does kind of cast a pall over everything that happens in Irish rugby, because we've got ourselves into this horrific situation where the only thing that matters is this one match in a World Cup quarter-final every 4 years, and we keep flunking it.
Yep. Yeah, they do. Now, to be fair to Ireland, you can't do anything about a draw. That's nothing to do with the team. That's nothing to do with the coach, nothing to do with the organisation. Draws are what they are. And you get a good draw, you get a tough draw. They've got a tough draw. They've just got to prepare. Now, if they go out there with a different mindset than what they've had at the other World Cups, and this is what I think it could be advantage. The last number of World Cups I've been in Ireland, I couldn't believe the way everyone was talking about the preparation. It was like as if this was a genius team that were just going to cruise through. And I'm sitting there going, well, I don't think that's the case. I think they're going to really struggle to get through these quarterfinals. Whereas now, no one's going to expect them to get through. No one's going to expect them to win. To win that is going to be near impossible. That takes a lot of pressure off the team, but it also sets their mindset at a very different place. They know they've got to really work beyond any way they've ever worked to have a shot at winning a quarterfinal. I think that could be a really powerful thing for Ireland going into a quarterfinal, because we have to just say, we have to just acknowledge, not to blame anyone or stick a knife into anyone, but the preparation for the past World Cups obviously hasn't been where it needed to be, because they've lost the quarterfinals, and in many cases quite horrifically lost the quarterfinals. So this is an opportunity for the nation to reset, not to get our expectations where they should be, but for the team to take an opportunity to say, well, we've got nothing to lose, but we also know we've got to be better than we've ever been, or there is no chance at a quarterfinal.
And it does seem so strange for us to be obsessing about a quarterfinal, like there's a medal or a trophy at the end of that game. Like, that's the other part of this. So we had Pat Lam on at the start of lockdown, and he was like, yeah, I never really quite got your fascination with the quarterfinals, because that's not the end of the tournament. I know you've never done it before, but it's not over. He was like, maybe you need to think about maybe have a bigger ambition than that.
Without doubt. I think for the obvious reason that Ireland have bowed out at the quarterfinal every time. Now, I can tell you, when France beat New Zealand in 2007 at the quarterfinal, New Zealand were obsessing about quarterfinals as well. And New Zealand obsessed about winning a World Cup up until they won in very controversial circumstances, I might add. A very poor refereeing exhibition that day denied France many penalties, and New Zealand won. But New Zealand had a monkey on their backs about World Cups. There's no doubt about that. They had a massive psychological problem about performing at World Cups. A number of the players, the New Zealand players, tell the story that when they got back into the change room, they broke down in tears, not for joy, but for relief, when they won the World Cup at Eden Park in New Zealand, 2011. So, the World Cup brings a lot of pressures, and certain countries and certain teams have handled them very well, and other teams haven't. So, but I think the point I would make about Pat's comment, I'm a great believer in that on a number of occasions, the best team at the World Cup has not won the World Cup. But the team that can get through a quarterfinal to a semi-final, you got a great shot at it. And I would suggest to you that in 91 and 99, Australia were not the best team at the World Cup. but they got through their quarterfinals into a semi-final, and then they didn't play the best team in the final. They played France in 99, who had completely shocked New Zealand, who were a great side with Jonah Lomu in it, in the semi-final. And in 91, they got through and beat England, who had beaten France in the semi-final on a brutal day. That France were the best team in that World Cup. So if you win a quarter-final, you give yourself a real big shot at it. But if you don't win, I mean, what do I say? Do I need to go on? Do I need to explain?
I'm just going to put forward a positive theory here from an Irish point of view. So let's just focus on the possibility that it might be France in a quarter-final and the problems that come with being the host nation. Let's go back to 2015 and remember how England absolutely collapsed under the weight of their own expectation in that home World Cup for them. The expectation, Matt, is already here now for France. The expectation is that we played the World Cup 2023 winners just 2 months ago at the end of the Six Nations. On top of that then, let's bring it back to see if we can top our pool. And they're playing South Africa. You will know that last time South Africa won the World Cup, they weren't all that good in the 2011 Rugby World Cup. Australia beat them in the World Cup final. Is this complete lunacy to think that actually maybe there is a path and a world in which Ireland might be able to pip those two and just, sneak away from New Zealand and not have to play them at all?
Well, of course not. Of course, the weight of expectation on France will be massive. There's no doubt about that. I mean, the whole country. I'm talking to you from France. I'm living down in Narbonne, and I'm talking to you from here right now. And I can tell you that the expectation that's being built by the French themselves, not by anyone else, but by the French themselves, is staggeringly big. They think they've got a shot at winning this World Cup. They have been in the final twice, never won it, and this is their big shot. They're putting this alongside the Football World Cup of '99, when of course they won the Football World Cup, hosting the World Cup in France, and this is going to be the same thing. There is no doubt about that. I suppose to give it balance, France will have a sensational team, in my opinion, by 2023, barring injury. They have really got some exciting young players coming through, and they're doing an exceptionally good job on blooding them and bringing them through. We only had to watch their performance against England. I don't know if your listeners and viewers are aware, but what happened was Fabien Galtier, the French coach, had come to an agreement, almost a pact with the devil, where he was only allowed to play his best team 3 times during the last autumn internationals. He didn't know he was going to make the final, so he chose to play them 3 times on the way through in the pool games, if you like, for want of a better term, the lead-up games to the final. They won those, they got to the final, and he couldn't pick his best side. He had to let them go back and play for his club. So he picked many second and third string players who had to play England at Twickenham. And the talk all week, and mea culpa, I was saying it as well, that they put out a third string side and England are going to kill them. And of course, these young men came out and gave what can only be described as an inspirational display. It was truly one of the best performances I've seen in a number of years. It was just, we use the term courage and bravery, I think it gets thrown around a bit too more, but this was courage personified. These young guys were just incredible at Twickenham against a fantastic English side who they outplayed. And except for some very well publicised and I think absolutely outrageous refereeing, they would have won that game. So while it's not impossible, and there is going to be an absolute ocean of weight on the shoulders of the French team, they're going to be a pretty good side. So, there's no way that Ireland can cut this up other than it's a mountain, and a giant mountain. But again, I'll take it back. That is different for Ireland. That's a different way for them having to go into a World Cup. They've always gone in with over-expectation from the Irish public. And I think that's been a burden for the Irish team. And I also think they bought into it. Robbie Kearney's book, Robbie's a great guy, a friend, and I was on TV with him a couple of months ago. Not a criticism of Robbie, but in his book he says that he didn't realise, the team didn't realise going into the next last World Cup in 2019, that they were in trouble as a team playing until they got beaten by England at Twickenham by a cricket score a couple of weeks beforehand. And then it dawned on them. Now, I read that with I just couldn't believe what I was reading, because to me and the rest of the rugby world, Ireland have been in trouble for a year. Now, if they change their mindset going into this World Cup saying, well, we got trouble from day one, they'll come out fighting rather than with an over-expectation. So, yes, that's when they can switch it on France. So they've got to use both. There's going to be a weight of expectation on New Zealand. Don't forget, New Zealand they haven't got monkeys on their back. They've got gorillas. And France are going to have expectation, and they're vulnerable. Everyone's going to expect them to beat Ireland, and that's when Ireland can quite often pull off a great performance, especially if they get their mindset right. And that's what I'm focusing on. Ireland have got to focus on themselves here.
The mindset question is really interesting, because it's obviously the biggest challenge for any coaching staff. Once you get the technical proficiency to a level that you know it's going to be sustainable under pressure, getting the mindset right is obviously the hardest thing to do. It was interesting from the kickoff in the Montpellier-Leinster game. Leinster swarmed on Montpellier's kickoff, and Devin Toner looked like a 19-year-old, spry, sliding along the ground, ripping the ball from his. And you're like, wow, look at this. We could do a little bit of this from the Ireland team at the moment. But I hate comparing one coaching ticket's performance with another coaching ticket's, because they're completely different jobs at a different standard. And yet it's hard not to, just as a sports fan, going, these are the same players, and look at the clarity of expression that they have in every activity they do. Are we just working through the difficult period of a new coach bedding in? Is that what's happening at the moment with the Ireland team?
Look, I have great fears for the coaching ticket of the national side. Great fears. The next few months are absolutely crucial for Ireland and the current Irish coaches. I think if they don't perform, if the team doesn't perform in the next Six Nations, well, I think the leaders at the IRFU, David Nucifora, and the leaders at Irish Rugby have got a massive decision on their hands, because I just think the performance from the Irish national team, despite what a lot of people inside the group are saying, has been very poor. And we do have to acknowledge, and I can tell you, I know, coaching at provincial level and coaching at international level is totally different. For Leinster's sake, I would not want Leo to go in there now. I think it's a particularly hard time for the national Irish team. I would like him to stay for another few years to prolong his career at Leinster before he goes to be the national coach. But I think he is our next national coach, without doubt. He sits in the background as Leo Cullen, the Leinster coach, and is so quiet, doesn't say a word, lets everyone else take all the limelight. He just cruises under the radar, which is exactly what he did as a player when I coached him. He didn't want any of that sort of stuff, but he's a great leader, great mind, and doing a phenomenal job. I have huge respect for what he's doing at Leinster. But that is a different level. Montpellier were a rabble. They were poorly organised, but Leinster just took them apart. But the difference is Leo has now got 5 or 6 years under his belt as a head coach, and Andy Farrell's got 5 months, 6 or 10 months. Like how did we appoint? And I was not against Andy. It's just you've got to have skin in the game. You've got to have the yards. You've got to make your mistakes as a coach. Every coach makes mistakes, and you've got to learn from them. But when you're learning and doing it at national level, wow, that's so hard. And the team has not played well away from home. Now, we talked before, who are they beating? They're beating Wales and Scotland. Well, we expect them to beat Wales and Scotland. Wales have dropped dramatically. Scotland have dropped dramatically. It's the big games, especially not on Irish soil, where the teams have got to really stand up and perform, and they haven't done that. Now, is it early in Andy Farrell's reign? Yes, it is. Have we seen promising things? Well, I think it's been pretty mediocre. What's the future hold? Well, that's going to be the key. What do the leaders do? If they perform in this next Six Nations, then we go, okay, well, things are working. We agree. Keep going forward. But if they're not, there's some really, really tough decisions to make.
What would the definition of performing be for you? So does that mean we have to win the 2 home games or one of the 2 home games against England and France and compete for the championship? Is that the level that Ireland should be at when we have England and France at home? We've over the last decade generally considered ourselves competitive at the top level.
Yeah, and we have been. Ireland have been. You know, again, people accuse me of being negative. I'm quite open to say that when Ireland beat New Zealand in November 2018, I said they can win the World Cup. When they won the Grand Slam against England at Twickenham on St Patrick's Day in 2019, the first half performance was the best performance I have ever seen from an Irish side. The first half at Twickenham when they won the Grand Slam was the best performance. Since then, their decline has been dramatic. So what do we expect? Well, you can't. I'll give you another example of what I just said before. The young French team performance against England, they didn't win, but that was an incredible performance. Now, when we go to Twickenham and we run into English players 270 times, run into them 270 times, and we don't even look like scoring a try till our substitute 10 comes along and chips over the top. That's not a performance. I don't give a rat's what's gone on there. Those sort of performances are not up to standard. Now, if Ireland come out at Twickenham or Paris, and they're really tough places to go, but they put in good performances. They're showing that they can break down defences. They're showing their defence is capable of holding. They're showing that they've got a different kicking strategy than what they've had in the past. They're showing these things. That's progress. Now, England and France coming to the Aviva, that's going to be very interesting because Ireland have got a sensational home record. I think it's 19 games now that they've only had one loss, I think, in the 19 games. That's brilliant. So we need performances. It's not always going to result in wins. That's not the way international rugby goes. And I'll give you an example of Australia. They had 2 draws. They beat New Zealand once, were walloped twice, but had a draw. Now they won the draw, if you like. And that's what I mean. Playing a great side like New Zealand, you go out and you see performances and you go, well, it's a mixed bag, but there were a lot of really good things there. Wasn't perfect. We're not at New Zealand standard just yet, but there's been growth. Now, right now, when we look at that Irish side, I can't see growth. That's what's really worrying me.
Matt, you say that you think Leo Cullen's going to be the next Ireland head coach, possibly. Is it a copy and paste job in terms of the entire Leinster coaching ticket into the Ireland role if things go wrong over the next little while? Great question.
If I had the answer to that, I'd be advising Leo and making a lot of money. Look, I don't know that it's total copy and paste. Leo will know that. I would think there's a fair bit of it. I would think there's a fair bit of what he's done there. Ultimately, if you look around the world at countries the size of Ireland, and I'd include Australia in that because their rugby numbers are roughly, they're bigger, but roughly the same. New Zealand have much more players. But the sides when they perform really well, unlike England and South Africa, they have their provincial sides playing a successful brand for them, and they mimic that brand at the international level. It's not always exactly the same because international rugby is different. There's just such little space at international rugby now because of the rushing D. But if you look at the New Zealanders, and they've been the best, even though they didn't win the last World Cup, they've been the best for 10, 12 years. That's what they've done. And I think Leinster's model is an exceptionally good model. If we watch Munster's performance last weekend, they weren't happy with the end result, but I saw a lot of really positive play from Munster. I thought I could see Stephen Larkin's hand all over that, and Coach Van Graham's got to take credit. He's the guy that's bringing it all together. They didn't finish off. There was a lot of negatives, and they were pretty lucky that Harlequins didn't kick their penalty goals. But I could see what they were trying to do, and that will come through with a bit of time. They're behind Leinster. They're a work in progress, but I can see what they're trying to do. Now, if they get those two and Ulster, who are trying their guts out, not quite there either. And Connor, again, what a gutsy performance from Connor. Everyone playing similarly with a similar philosophy, and they're not far off it right now. And the national team doing the same thing, I think that is a way forward. And Leo's a guy that can bring that sort of model together. Whether he brings Stewie Lancaster with him, that's up to Leo, or Felipe Conopami, I don't know. That's up to Leo. But that would be my thinking.
Could you see Lancaster being pulled from under Leo, brought up as head coach to Ireland, and you kind of have the best of both worlds in that way? Like, can you see Lancaster reprising his role as a head coach?
No.
Right.
And I think that would be a big mistake for Stuart. A very, very big mistake for Stuart. He has thrived and grown as an assistant coach, and we don't want to make the same mistake twice. I think Stuart obviously has learned, like we all do. We all do learn while you're on the job. And that's the problem with being a head coach. Usually when you just got to figure it out, no one will give you a job because you've been sacked too many times. But it's Stuart, to me, and I don't know him, but I admire what he's done. I really, really admire what he's done. He has copped a really humiliating kick in the teeth leaving England, and he's accepted a role as an assistant that I think he is brilliant at. And some guys are just brilliant assistant coaches, but they're not great head coaches. And I don't see that as I'm not being derogatory in any way, because they're totally different roles. Assistant coaches get to do a lot more coaching than the head coach. The head coach has to do a lot more other things, and they're burdens. They're not pleasant things. And a lot of dealing with personnel, dealing with boards, CEOs, budgets, all these things, where assistant coach gets to coach. And I think Stuart's done a wonderful job on that, and I think Leinster have benefited. But you've got to give Leo massive credit for pulling that whole system together. That's a head coach's gig. And I wouldn't want to see Stuart then taken out from what he's been really great at, which is coaching, to being a head coach where he's got to spend more of his time doing other things. And I think we're seeing that with Andy. Andy was and remains one of the best defensive coaches rugby's ever seen. Now, whether he is equally adept at being a head coach, the jury is very much out. Now, I'm not against him being great as a head coach. I'd hope the guy could do it. He's a really good bloke. It's not my point. My point is he should have been given opportunities to do this at club level on a number of occasions, like Fabien Galtier has done with Stade Francais, Montpellier and Toulon, and had his successes and his failures on that journey before he was appointed French coach. With Andy Farrell, he hasn't done that at all, so he's learning at the top job. Why would we then put one of our most successful homegrown Irish coach as far as winning trophies in Leo Cullen and then not give him the job? And I think we've got to stop this cultural cringe with our coaches. You've got Rowan O'Gara doing an unbelievably good job with La Rochelle. They just won on Saturday. They're leading the top 14. They're coming fourth after one game in Pool A in the Heineken Cup. Ronan's doing an unbelievable job. Jeremy Davidson's down at Breve, fighting for his life, doing a great job. The guy's been given hard gigs and he's a scrapper. He's going through, doing a wonderful job. Mark McCall over at Saracens, doing an incredible job as well. And we've got Leo Cullen. These are all guys that have worn the green jersey, that are local boys, and they are now fantastically experienced coaches. We've got to start appointing Indigenous guys into these roles, not keep bringing in so many overseas guys. We need overseas guys. You bring, even though I've got an Irish passport, I'm overseas. I've got no problems with bringing in guys to provide some technical input and support. Ireland's done that brilliantly for 20 years. Andy Friend's doing a great job over in Connacht. Look, he's wonderful. Van Graham and his coaching staff, all foreigners, all doing a great job down there, and they're providing their knowledge to the Irish players. That is wonderful. But it is time to come back to having Indigenous coaches after this regime. Now, whenever that is, I'm not saying we get rid of them now, whenever that is, but the Indigenous coaches have earned the right to be national coaches. And we have to start thinking like that and not looking the other way. And I do think, even though I don't have an Irish accent, so I'm speaking against myself, to have Irishness in the coaching team, I think is important. I think it is important. Not everyone has to be, but I do believe there is some that's needed.
Matt, good stuff. Thanks a million. Happy Christmas to you.
You too. Happy Christmas, guys. Keep safe.
Always great to chat to you. It's Matt Williams with some thought-provoking stuff for us there this morning. 087 9 180 180 is the number to give us your views on that, and you can keep your Mayo heartbreak. Which was the worst of the times you had your heart broken? The first cut is the deepest, or is it?
I'm not sure it is, to be honest. I think
the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth cuts that are just as deep. Really interesting stuff from Matt Williams there. Like, maybe there is just an assumption that Leo is next man up, whenever that is. That could be soon. That could be a far time in the future.
And it's hard to know whether it's the best thing to do to almost put that into stone right now and say, Leo, you're the next man up, or to kind of keep him waiting, because...
I'd say you probably don't tell him.
Yeah.
Because then, obviously, his contract negotiations are like, well, you're going to have to pay me. Oh, look, I've got an amazing offer from somebody else. You're going to have to pay me. Not that he would do that or use it to his advantage. But look, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Like, the Leinster performance of the weekend was like, wow, this is what it was like to watch a really great Irish team play. Really good stuff.
You see, that's the thing. Like, I get that Montpellier were a rabble, as Matt Williams said, and Leinster's opposition in Europe are never going to be anywhere near as good, relatively speaking, as the opposition that Ireland will come up against in the likes of England and France. But I still think that there has been a little bit of evidence already this season that Leinster have learned from what happened against Saracens. Now, we won't know for sure until they come up against a team with that sort of quality again, but there's a little bit of evidence to show that they've learned from their mistakes and have addressed a glaring weakness. Like, their scrum is really good at the weekend. To be honest with you, like, I was looking at the starting front row, I was looking at who was on the bench, and I was thinking to myself, it's good that they have the lads on the bench. Who knows what could happen here? And that was just a part of my brain saying that, you know, they got smashed in this area against Saracens and maybe they'll need their high-profile players. And they brought them on, but they didn't need them. They were really, really good in that department for the entire game. And I wonder, is that just part of Leinster thinking over the last few months, this is an area where we need to improve on and where we need to get better at, and they succeeded in doing that. And that's really encouraging if you're looking at a coaching ticket, that they've identified a weakness and turned it into a bit of an advantage.
Yeah, look, it is the hallmark of good coaching where you don't have your frontline players and the team plays exactly the same and has all of the characteristics of the team as if they would have all their full-time players. Because that's very important in rugby. It turns out with the attrition rate that, and I keep making this point, everybody keeps saying waiting to judge X coach until he has Y set of players available, but that's never going to happen. You're never going to have everybody available. So 087 9 180 180 is the number if you want to get in touch with us. It's 42 minutes past 8 this morning. John Duggan is with us. John, good morning to you.
Kieron, Owen, how are we doing?
What's the crack?
Just need a haircut, but apart from that, we're good.
I mean, you're allowed to go and get your haircut. That's like, I'd say you're choosing to do this now, John.
Yeah, maybe I should listen to the news a bit more.
The barbers are open.
Yeah, maybe today.
How long are you going to let it grow? What's the longest you've ever let it go?
I think the longest was when we were in lockdown about May or June time, and then I actually bought those clippers and actually bought a cape from Amazon and got the whole gear going, and then the better half then did a job on it, and she didn't do a great job, and then I tried to do a good job on it myself. It wasn't working. We did enough to make it a little bit respectable, but it looked a bit floppy for a while. But then, look, what's the difference between a good haircut and a bad haircut? 2 weeks.
Yeah, or you just find a barber who'll fix it for you. That's yeah. Look, we all did bad haircuts at various stages over lockdown. I inflicted some on my poor son to the point where he looked a bit like a street urchin from
Oliver. Or
exactly. That was exactly the one I was looking for. Anyway, rescue this, John. What's going on?
A merger between the GPA and the women's GPA. 4,000 members are going to be under the same block. 96% of the women's GPA voting for this last night, 100% of the GPA. So we're looking at a board of 50-50, and then you'll have to ask yourself the question, can we get to a stage then where the LGFA and camogie are under the GA umbrella? Maybe this is a step towards that in the future. Also, there's matches tonight in the All-Ireland. Obviously, the champions are Limerick, but the runners-up are Waterford, and Iarla Daly is back playing for the under-20s of Waterford tonight against Tipperary in the Bordgosh Energy. Munster semi-final throw-in Dungarvan at 7 o'clock. Also a Munster minor football match, a semi-final between Kerry and Cork in Tralee, Austin Stack Park, 7 o'clock. Obviously, a lot of tributes being paid to Gerard Houllier. Passed away yesterday, very sadly, at the age of 73. I was manager of Liverpool for 6 years, won 3 cups in 2001, the FA Cup, the League Cup, and the UEFA Cup. He was obviously technical director as well of France. narrowly failed to qualify for them the World Cup in '94, but did a huge amount of work with young players, bringing them through so they could win that World Cup in 1998. Then he eventually managed Aston Villa, but also league success with Lyon and Paris Saint-Germain. And Jamie Carragher, who played under Houllier at Liverpool, says that he made the Reds believe they could win silverware again.
I actually think of, almost there being a line in the sand when the Bootloom era finished, really, and Gerrard came in, and the success the club have had sort of since, really. Liverpool have just obviously won the league now under Jurgen Klopp. There's a lot of trophies won under Gerard Houllier and Rafa Benitez in the 2000s, and that was almost the rebirth of the club and getting the club back on, the footing of challenging in Europe and playing in European finals and winning trophies as well. And I always felt it was underestimated, the job he did at Liverpool.
You can never forget that FA Cup final 2001. Michael Owen in Cardiff, absolutely brilliant stuff against Arsenal under Gerard Houllier. Then the Alaves game, 5-4. I was working this kind of shift at the time, back in the previous job 20 years ago, and I remember saying to myself, I'm not going to bother watching this. The UEFA Cup final, Liverpool Alaves, and you wake up then about 3 hours later, it's 5-4 to Liverpool. And great times and great silverware, and very sad that Gerard Houllier, who was a real kind of intellectual of the game, would pass away. The draw was made yesterday for the 2023 World Cup, only just 3 years away, nearly. So Ireland getting South Africa, the defending champions getting Scotland, and possibly then again Samoa and Russia if the draw goes that way. But definitely South Africa, definitely Scotland. Darts is back in London tonight. Peter Wright beginning the defence of the PDC World Championship. Keane Barry's the first Irish player in action. The meat teenager taking on Jeff Smith. But one of the interesting things about that is that this is the only day they can have fans there, because London's now got back into a more severe lockdown with fans. So what we saw at Arsenal the other night is not going to happen. Arsenal will be without fans, and I don't think it made much of a difference. A lot of talk in the back pages about Arteta will have the backing of the club's board, and why shouldn't he really? They can't be really thrown out Arteta after such a short period in time. But factions in the dressing room. A lot
Spoken like a true Spurs fan, John.
Well, what if Arteta's a complete joker? They got to throw him out if he is. Maybe he is. We don't know. That's the problem, isn't it?
Keep him there as long as you want. I know Mesut Ozil is in Siberia in that, but
well, let me put this to you, John. How would you feel about Mauricio Pochettino rocking up? A world-class manager, available, knows the scene very well. How would you feel, first off, if Pochettino rocked up there to take that gig?
I've nothing against Pochettino. Pochettino gave me one of the best nights of my life in Amsterdam. So if Pochettino went to Arsenal, I'd be the bigger man. I'd be magnanimous to say, look, Pochettino, it's good. You're good to go and work at Arsenal, because we know that Arsenal can take years to take Pochettino 5 to 10 years to get Arsenal back to where they should be. But I actually think that Pochettino is waiting for the United job.
Of course he is, but he might not. The thing, if you're Arsenal, and it was like, everybody knew Jurgen Klopp was going to come available at some point. You needed to be making your overtures and saying, look, these are our plans, this is the money, this is the scouting system, you can do whatever you want, this is where you'll live, that was, you need to woo somebody. While Pochettino doesn't have the United gig, teams will be wooing him, the good ones. Oh, and how would you feel if Arsenal were to...
Oh, amazing. I was looking back, so this came up actually during last season when Pochettino left Tottenham and Unai Emery was out the door. And I was just looking back at some old footage of how Spurs fans reacted when George Graham was about to be appointed Tottenham manager. And they were all like, we're not going to support this club whatsoever. So I'm not sure, is that a mark of where Spurs were at then, that they're at a higher ebb than where Arsenal are at now? Because I don't think there's too many Arsenal fans who would stop supporting Arsenal if Mauricio Pochettino became their manager. It'd be a phenomenal appointment. He's the best out-of-work manager in the world.
Start the move now, Owen.
Start the move now. If you
beat the drum.
I don't think it's time to sack Arteta, but it definitely is the time to sack him if Mauricio Pochettino is available.
Well, I don't know if Pochettino would have had a patio with a Spurs crest carved into it. That's how Arsenal... George Graham was an Arsenal player. He was so Arsenal that it just felt so alien to us at the time. And it never really worked out. We never really took him to our hearts. With Pochettino at Arsenal, I'd have no issue with it, because, look, he did what he could at Spurs. But the wooing is interesting, because Jose Mourinho was wooed by Spurs when Pochettino was there. And he was going to matches. Levy was always an admirer. So that does happen, and it should happen, really, as you say. And but the thing about it is, Arsenal have so much corporate turnover of personnel. All the new people in there, they're all new in the last couple of years. The CEO, they've got rid of a lot of, not rid, but a lot of people have left. So the Gazidis left, went to Milan and that kind of thing. And are you going to have those kind of wooing or those decisions or those kind of lunches if you've got a completely new corporate structure?
Is Kieron isn't Pochettino's agent by any chance? If he is, then he's walking in the door.
I don't know, actually.
Right. Anything else on?
Well, the hurling was obviously amazing at the weekend. A great experience to be there, and it just felt so strange. Such a weird privilege to be there, and it's a very kind of odd thing where you know that 1 million people are watching and listening and looking at this thing, but you can't see any of them, which is a very strange thing. And it was an absolutely complete performance by Limerick. And Limerick should never get enough of this, because Limerick, for so many decades really, were underperforming in terms of hurling. They won 3 All-Ireland and 21 titles at the start of the millennium. Never really progressed on that. Were beaten by 24 points by Tipperary in 2009. There was a strike then. And to come and win these 2 All-Irelands and win so impressively with such a complete performance in an All-Ireland final, to score 30 points with their 2 wing forwards, Morrissey and Hegarty, scoring 12 points. They've really built something great there. John Kiley, Paul Connerk, and the work they've done over the last 10 years in their academy, and it's richly deserved. Yeah,
absolutely. More Limerick talk to come, more hurling talk to come a little bit later on in the show as well. John, good stuff. Thanks very much for that.
All right, guys. Cheers.
Right. I want to play you this. It is the trailer of the new movie, which is called The Racer. It's in Irish cinemas right now. We're going to talk to the director, Kieron J. Walsh, next.
I take this opportunity to say what an honour it is to host the first Tour de France outside mainland Europe.
Dom is going to be riding in the Tour de France on Saturday.
You gonna win? No, I'm a support rider. I use my energy for the lead rider to win.
Don't you ever want to win yourself?
Of course. But that's a dream.
I hear this is your last tour. Tough shit.
I need to know about next year. My contract.
You're nearly 39 years old. What do you want me to say? The team needs your focus, nothing to distract you.
What's the worst that can happen?
If you don't take it, you won't win.
Now give me.
Why risk your life like that?
Everybody does it.
If you're not even allowed to win, you're a loser. Professional loser.
Tour starts tomorrow, 10 a.m. After the grounded part, you're out of contract, free to go.
Without a bike, I'm nobody.
3, 2, 1.
Kieron, good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning to you. Thanks for having me on.
Watching the trailer, what's that like?
I could only hear it, and it sounds pretty energetic to me.
It is. Is it hair on the back of your neck territory at this stage when the movie's out there and there's nothing you can do, or is it really nerve-wracking to...
It's terribly nerve-wracking, and I've got to say more so than ever because of the pandemic, because not all the cinemas are open, and a lot of the cinemas, the exhibitors are kind of scared about the future of cinema, to be honest. So therefore, they've put a lot of old movies back into the cinemas, like Elf and It's a Wonderful Life and Love Actually. And all I can say is, no, actually, go see The Racer.
Does this come from a passion for cycling yourself, Kieron? Does it come from a nostalgia of, I guess, that Grand Départ in 1998?
It certainly does come from a nostalgia from that time. I can't say as I was a huge cycling fan when I first started working on this picture, but actually what fascinated me more than anything was trying to tell the story of these domestiques, of these support riders, the guys who sacrificed their entire lives for somebody else. It takes a particular kind of man or particular kind of person really to decide that they are satisfied with that role in their lives. And I found that aspect of the sport fascinating. I remember even at the time, like 22 years ago now, believe it or not, I remember like everybody in Ireland at the time, pretty much thinking that it was just everybody gets on a bike and whoever's the fastest. But, you know, I found out that obviously, you know, cycling is it's a team sport for individuals, and the idea of these domestiques working around sprinters and working around guys who are going to win the jerseys, I just thought it was amazing. So it's a character study really about this particular domestique who's reaching the end of the road in his career.
And not only willing to put himself through the physical toll that the road brings, but also through the physical and well-being dangers that come with blood doping, which is kind of done in such an unadulterated way in the film. And part of you, while watching it, thinks there's going to be some sort of realisation at the end, you know, that all doping is bad and all that. But I think that the message of the film really is that this was a real part of the day-to-day life of being a cyclist. And if anything, those people who would have come into it with the ambitions of being clean would have been broken by the system.
Yeah, it was endemic at the time, you know, really, like, and that's why I have that innocent character, Dardon, who's just come on board the tour, his first tour, and he thinks he can do it clean, and he's, you know, full of ambition to do that, which is terrific. But, you know, you can just see that he's going to get ground down by the system. And the irony of the situation is that this particular tour in '98, everybody thought, the officials, the people who organised the tour and owned the Tour de France, thought that this was potentially going to be the last tour ever, because it was so rife with drugs and the riders were going on strike, and it was just a terrible situation. It was called, in the end, the Tour de Dopage, or the Tour of Shame, or Tour de Farce even. So they decided that they were going to put in some very heavy structures and testing, and really kind of like try and stamp the drug out of the sport, all drugs out of the sport. And for the next 7 years, Lance Armstrong won the Tour de France.
Yeah, he came and saved the whole thing.
Great job, didn't he?
Yeah, he did, certainly.
Kieron, what research went into the scenes where cyclists are blood doping in their hotel room? Because it seems pretty authentic.
Well, you know, believe it or not, it's actually quite hard to find anybody who's prepared to talk about it. And I did. You know, I went to some guys who were in the tour 22 years ago. One particular guy who won the first stage that year in the Phoenix Park. And I spoke to him, and I gave him the script and asked him, would he have a look through it? Because I wanted to see about authenticity. And when it came to those scenes, because I kind of was saying, look, can you give me an indication as to whether I'm in the right world with those scenes? I knew I kind of was, but I wanted absolute confirmation. But there was silence. It was just kind of like they neither, this is a couple of times, they neither said they were or they said they weren't. But because by saying anything at all is kind of implicating themselves, and they don't want to do that, you know. But there's plenty of material written about it. There's plenty of there is some firsthand information in books by people like Charlie Veglius, the Domestique. As his book is called Domestique. There's also a book called End of the Road by Alistair Fotheringham, which is all about the '98 tour. And there's information in that. Like, all of this is kind of speculative, and apart from some of the first-hand accounts. So, you know, we did our best to try and make it as authentic as possible.
I think one of the books that you could add into that list as well is Tyler Hamilton's book, who would be on the show with us a couple of times. A really kind of horrifying picture he paints of some of the scenes that really actually haven't seen in film until this, you know, the heart monitor dipping below a certain point, having to wake up, having to get on the bike. I mean, that's the exact sort of picture he paints in his book. As I say, not just the physical toll that the road would take on you, but like your livelihood being put at risk for supporting another rider, basically.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler's book is such a page turner. I mean, it really is. It was like probably the most thrilling of all the cycling books that I'd read, you know. I just couldn't put it down, you know. And some of them, like Domestique by Charlie Veglius, was very interesting, but it wasn't like the torrential read that Tyler's book was. And it really kind of had a feeling of a thriller about it almost, you know, and I wanted to sort of get that energy into the film. So he was very helpful, that book was.
Can I just ask them, what's your theory on what Festina and that affair did for, I guess, Irish cycling or cycling in Ireland, for this amazing moment to be remembered for one thing only. This amazing Irish moment to be remembered for a huge drug bust. I mean, there was obviously a great boom in the late 80s, but I wonder did this actually set it back in terms of the vantage point that Irish people had of the Tour de France?
That's a good question. I mean, the Tour never came back. The Giro arrived back, or arrived, should I say. You'd really have to speak to cyclists about that. You know, it's. I know that it's like a blot on the landscape. It really is, and you can't say the word Tour de France in Ireland without the kind of whole thing about drugs coming up in conversation. I know that, as I said, that Paul McQuaid brought in the blood passport as a result of what happened in Ireland in '98. But it didn't seem to really kind of connect. It depended on how sophisticated your drug taking was. And obviously Lance Armstrong and Michele Ferrari had a very sophisticated system that they could actually, and the money to be able to work around it. But, you know, Ireland is still kind of punching above its weight in terms of cycling with people like Sam Bennett, you know, so it obviously didn't deter the youngsters.
Kieron, I should mention Kieron Cassidy, who's having a career year at the moment, a co-producer of Where's George Gibney, and now this at the same time as well, coming out. I know it's like an overnight success after 25 years of incredible hard work, but like he's having quite a good time at the moment.
That's an amazing, Where is George Gibney? I mean, I actually learned to swim in New Park Comprehensive, where George used to work. I was never taught by him, thankfully. But it's a remarkable piece of work. I mean, it's really something else. Everybody should listen to it. But Kieron came up with the original idea for the racer. It was called the Domestique then. And he was, you know, as you know, he's fascinated with sport and just kind of came up with an idea of, I think it was for a short film originally, actually, the idea of these guys getting out of bed and getting onto the rollers in the middle of the night. That was kind of like the kernel of the film, and it kind of grew from there. And it's an Irish production, Katie Hawley as well. Yes, that's right. Katie produced it along with Yvonne Donoghue, Blinder Films production. We made most of the film in Ireland, but also we shot in Luxembourg because it was a Luxembourg co-production. And Belgium was involved as well. That's why there's a couple of Belgian actors in it. Belgium, which is obviously particularly Flanders, is the home of cycling, really, much more so than France even.
Well, just on that, are the actors trained cyclists? Did you have to actually make them look like they knew what to do with a bike? Because I presume that was a challenge because it looks really good. Well,
actually, Louis Talp is a total cycle fanatic. Right. He happens to be a household name in Belgium as a kids' TV actor, believe it or not. He's a character called Mega Toby, which is every kid knows who Mega Toby is, even though he hasn't made the show for a long time, but they keep repeating it the whole time, you know? So you can't walk down the street without being stopped by various different people to get a selfie done with him. So he was very keen to try and shake that off, actually, to be honest. And he does Ironman 3 times a year. He actually knows a lot of the cyclists. He knows the quick step guys. He got me onto the bus, the quick step bus, about 2 years ago to see how these guys live now and what the ride, how the tour bus and go with them for a race and stuff like that, which is a real insight. Tom Steels is their director sportif there. So he was really, really helpful. And it just so happened that he is a cycling fanatic and a really terrific actor and a household name over there. So all of this stuff came together. And for him, it was a dream come true. For me, I got really lucky. We had a boot camp for all the riders for about 10 days in Luxembourg, where, you know, we had to, with the help of Paul McQuaid, our director, our kind of technical director, we had to get everybody to learn how to ride together, you know, in a pack, like in a peloton as a team, which is more difficult than you'd imagine, because they were all terrified of hitting off each other and falling off their bikes. But Paul and Louis managed to get them to feel confident about riding together. Louis became the domestique for the boot camp and for the actors in the team and kind of brought them all together. So he was really, really good. And Matteo Simoni, who plays Tartar, the Italian guy, you know, he's a pretty fit guy as well. These guys, modern actors, keep themselves pretty fit, you know, so which I'm lucky about, you know.
I should say as well, for anybody who goes to see it, the soundtrack is on Spotify as well, and I don't think I'll be the only one who'll be digging that out after watching it multiple times.
Listen,
yeah, there was a screening the other night, and people were saying, "My God, I want to go dancing." It was nice to hear.
You know, the connection between drugs and dancing is one that many people have made before. Kieron, the advice to everybody is don't go and see Elf. Forget about It's a Wonderful Life. You'll catch it on TV3 on Christmas morning anyway. Go this weekend.
Yes, and no, actually.
No, actually. Listen, best of luck and congratulations.
Thank you very much for having me on. I'm really delighted you enjoyed the picture.
No worries. That's Kieron Walsh, director of the new Irish sports movie that you've all got to go out and see. It's called The Racer, and it's in all good cinemas at the moment. 087 918 180 is the number. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be back talking hurling with Neil McManus, who was celebrating a big victory for Antrim at the weekend.
Merry Christmas, you filthy animal.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
OTB.
For Sterling! Raheem Sterling!
OTB live commentary. Never miss the action right here on OTB Sports Radio. Keep up to date with the latest scores on the OTB Sports app. The OTB Sports app. Live score updates straight to your phone.
Now you're welcome along to another edition of Scoreboard Jungle. This is our GA quiz, which we're running right across the championship. Tipperary, your time has come. And your representative, Tipperary, is Pat Short. Pat Short, hello.
How are you? This is going to be dreadful.
How confident are you?
Not very confident, I can assure you.
Good. Well, look, 10 points is the target you're aiming at here. Dr. Khan from Cork and Clare, Egan and Mayo have 10 points. Now, there have been some disgraceful efforts so far, so don't worry if it doesn't go well, okay?
Okay.
I won't name names. Owen Liston. So listen, 2 parts to this. Your part 1, 5 questions, 30 seconds, 1 point per correct answer. This is the take your point section. So you get 30 seconds here, and I'm going to fire 5 questions at you. Are you ready?
Go for it.
Okay, your time starts now. Which Tipperary footballer won an All-Star in 2016?
2016, Sweeney.
Colin O'Riordan plays for which AFL club?
Sydney.
How many All-Stars did Declan Brown win?
He didn't win enough.
That is incorrect. Well, that's correct and incorrect. Who was the Tipperary manager that led the team to the All-Ireland semi-final in 16? You can say pass.
Pass. Beg your pardon.
Okay, I'll squeeze in your last one. Who has won more All-Ireland senior football titles? Mayo or Tipperary?
I go Tipperary.
Well, you're correct. 4-3. So, Pat Short, which Tipperary footballer won an All-Star in 16? It was Michael Quinlivan. You said Sweeney, so it was Quinlivan. Yeah. You said Sydney Swans for Colin O'Riordan. That was correct. Declan Brown didn't win enough All-Stars. You are correct there, but he won 2. So I can't give you a point for that. Liam Kearns, the manager in 16, and then you were right with Tipperary. So you have 2 points on the board. You have 2 points on the board. Not too bad. Right, we're moving on to the going for goal round. Okay. Basically, another 30 seconds, 5 questions. I'll give you 3 points per correct answer here.
Okay.
But there's a sudden death quality to this. So as soon as you get one wrong, finito, over. Okay. Your time starts now. So before Tipperary won there at the weekend, what other county, other than Cork or Kerry, have won the Munster Championship?
Other than Cork and Kerry, have won the Munster to Clare.
Correct. 3 points. Clare in 92, of course. Good man. Next question. In what year did Tipperary win the All-Ireland minor title last?
Minor title. Oh God, the minor title. That was recent enough. I'll go 08.
11. Hard luck. Still, you got 1 there, so that's a very respectable 5 points, Pat Short.
Thank you very much.
You do not leave in disgrace.
I'm surprised myself I got that far, I can assure you.
Good man. Listen, Pat Short, thanks a million for doing that for us.
Not at all. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Off the ball.
I scored a goal in some kind of celebrity thing that I managed to get invited to, but Bez from the Happy Mondays was a goal. Oh, Jesus. He didn't put up much resistance, but he had the decency. He said, good goal, Tom. That was one of the highlights of my life. Like, he was watching the match. His head had been in goal. It's like, oh, that was a good goal, Tom.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio. Live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
I want to tell you about what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio across the day today. It is a very special Paddy Power day for you. OTB Gold, Joe Malloy meets Ruby Walsh at 1 o'clock. Then our Paddy Power football special starts. Matt Letitia and Ray Parler from 2. From 3, it's Jermaine Pennant and Stephanie Roach. From 4, it's a Paddy Power Crappie Quiz special. And then from 6 tonight, it is OTB Gold with Wexford in 56 with Art Foley and Ned Wheeler. And then OTB Tonight is live. Eoin, the movie The Racer, I actually haven't seen it yet. You have. Is it good?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thought it was very, very good. That was one thing that kind of stuck out to me when I was asking him at the end about whether or not the actors were trained cyclists or not, because it does seem very authentic, and it's something I'd imagine that's very easy to get wrong, or perhaps maybe not even that could just maybe slip through the cracks a little bit about getting all the dialogue right. But actually, as a piece of sporting content, it looks real, it looks brilliant. So that's one thing that stuck out to me. As I said, the soundtrack's brilliant. It's really, really good. Really enjoyed it. Watched it yesterday before doing that piece, and yeah, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's in the Lighthouse at the moment, and other places as well, I'd imagine.
OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Would you put it in the pantheon of great Irish sports movies? Yeah, absolutely. So we went through the great Irish sports movies as part of our fictitious GAA team a couple of months ago. So what are we talking here? What else is in the pantheon here? It's a good question. I'm having a mind. Do we include the boxer? Does that wasn't like it because it's technically about a boxer? Not really. I think we can put it in there. I'm trying to think about other ones. There just hasn't been many Irish sports movies in recent years. There's been some phenomenal documentary work done over the last few years. Taking documentaries out, yeah. Yeah, if you take documentaries out is what we mean. So in terms of great Irish live action, I think it's definitely up there. It is in the pantheon for sure. But that's why we were all like, wow, they managed Connell's Gaelic football scenes look authentic. It was because we're so starved. It's a good point, actually. That's why we were doing the fictitious GAA team, because of Normal People a few months ago. And yeah, it is right. There is kind of often this twee notion of how GAA is depicted on our screens, and that goes back through a history of, I guess, British people and American people essentially making the films in which people are playing Irish sports, and there has always been a very patronising attitude towards Paddy Irishman playing his Gaelic games. So that's why it was a little bit jarring to say, hold on a minute, this is spot on. Of course it helped it. There was a brilliant Irish director, and it was such a great Irish team working on that in terms of Normal People, but hopefully that's actually how things are actually looked at from an Irish standpoint as well. And yeah. Actually, I was going to say that, and I was also going to make the point that actually in The Racer you have this, what I'd imagine is a fairly authentic view of Irish people in 1998, and that's how all cinema is going right now, isn't it? All new movies that you see about Ireland definitely feature legitimate Irish accents and don't feature terrible representations of Ireland whatsoever. I'm looking at you, Wild Mountain Time, or whatever it's called. I was going to say, Don Draper better at marketing than diplomacy this week. 13 minutes past 9 here this morning. Mayo performed in 2016, 2017. 2014 Odyssey had everything: comebacks, red cards, controversy, venue changes, atmosphere, and daylight robbery. That will stay with me forever. That might be the issue, isn't it? That 2014, it feels like they blew it. The other years, they performed as well as they could and were still beaten. It's less painful when you know you've given your best. I don't think it's as painful as scoring 2 own goals in an All-Ireland final. I think that they are freak incidents that go beyond a level of performance. I get the whole point about blowing it, which kind of happened the first day against Kerry. Own goals is ramping home, by the way. Sorry, our vote. There's a little bit of time left for this. Own goals, 54%. GPS. See, if we frame GPS as needless red card when opposition down to 14 men, would that have been higher up? Semi-final against Kerry, 13.6%. I don't know. I completely agree with our
voters this morning. I think that's absolutely spot on. I think that is 1-4.
The semi-final against the Dubs in 2015, what happened?
So that goes to a replay. Dermot Connolly gets sent off the first day, doesn't he? And then he gets his red card overturned on the eve of the game. I don't really remember. I was at a Electric Picnic for the replay. I remember in a blur someone telling me that the Dubs are back in the All-Ireland, and yeah, they'd won actually comfortably enough in the end, considering the first game was a draw. I think in terms of Mayo-Dublin games, other than last year, I think that was probably Dublin's biggest win in that fixture. See, this is the thing. It's not like 2017 was the last time they played. It was the last time they played in an All-Ireland final. But we have the evidence of last year as well, and there was no heartbreak last year.
No.
There was a tense 82,000 people in Croke Park. See, like, this is also another kind of like, it goes back to like the comment the thing we were talking about at the start of the show about the mini culture war that's going on between Dublin and the rest of the country at the moment. 82,000 people packed out Croke Park last year for that All-Ireland football semi-final. There was queues outside the door of Super Value all around the country to get tickets for that game. And it wasn't just Mayo and Dublin people. Everybody wanted to be at that game. That was the hottest ticket in town because we had the best team, probably the best team in the history of Gaelic games, up against what could be their kryptonite. Now, of course, it turned out not to be. But if people are talking about how the interest in Gaelic football might wane with Dublin's dominance over the last little while, well, I would actually contend that there is no more interesting thing ever than seeing a team who could possibly beat Dublin. And the proof was there last year when so many people paid. You could have almost sold 90,000 tickets to that game last year for an All-Ireland semi-final, because the most attractive proposition in the country right now is Dublin potentially getting beaten. The problem is the least attractive proposition is Dublin winning by a landslide yet again. So those margins are very important.
All right, so that's your situation with the pain rankings. You were off last Tuesday, so we didn't get a power rankings in the aftermath of the semi-finals. Where I mean, can we change the power ranking now so that actually Dublin are no longer they no longer appear? Is there something that we can do here? Because otherwise, it's kind of pointless doing number one this week, surprise, for week 777.
Yeah, we could do that. I mean, that would definitely be...
The World Without Dublin would be pretty interesting. Who would be number two? You can't put Kerry. I'm sorry, you can't.
So here's the top 10 at the moment. So at number 10 is Roscommon, still there. The rest, naturally, 32 to 11. There's no change, obviously. We've just had the semi-final since the last update. So 10 is Roscommon, 9 is Cork. Then moving down to 8th place this week. So they were in 7th. They're now in 8th, is Tipperary. They got slaughtered by Mayo in an All-Ireland semi-final, but they hadn't got the big bump that I'd given to Cork after they beat Kerry because of the fact that they hadn't beaten a top-tier team, and it turned out that maybe I was right about that. I wanted Tipperary I thought Tipperary were going to put up a fight against Mayo, but I don't know. The people thought there was
a record amount for a beaten team in a semi-final.
I was accused of being inconsistent about how generous I was to putting Cavan up to 4th and how he only put Tipperary up to 7th, despite the fact that they both won their provinces. But I think it's plain to see that Cavan's path to get into the All-Ireland semi-final was much tougher. Now, I have moved Cavan down to 6th. So you got Tip in 7th, Cavan in 6th, and then the top 5 kind of falls into place here. So at 5th, we've got Tyrone, 4th, we've got Donegal. And I feel sad about that.
Tyrone improved as this has gone on. They got better and better up the rankings. It's like...
they were up one place this week anyway, that's for sure.
I mean, that's like, look, I think Tyrone need to get punished for going out in the first round of the championship.
Well, they did, and now they're back because actually a lot of things have kind of fallen back into place.
And say we have this crappy system where it's straight knockout again next year and it's Donegal, Tyrone, and one of those two, you should just take the risk of being 32nd because they're not going past that, and that's the end of it.
We've got Donegal at 4th. Like it does feel weird having Donegal back up above Cavan, but I gave Cavan that reprieve up in the top 4 for a while after beating them. But I think things might return to normal again next year. Number 3 is Kerry, number 2 is Mayo, and number 1 is Dublin. So there you go. The second best team against the first best team this weekend, according to the power rankings, and that's the way it's been now for a few weeks.
And how are you handicapping this game on?
I actually haven't checked it. I would say...
How are you?
I would say 6.
According to your power ranking, which is essentially the whole point. You should be able to tell how much teams can beat each other by.
Dublin are going to win. I would actually go one more. I'd say Dublin are going to win by 7.
Dublin are going to win by 7.
Dublin to win by 7.
Which I think is about right. To be honest, I think it might be 6.
It's amazing how tight that battle between Dublin and the spread has been over the last few years. It's been a little bit of a contest in itself. It's 6. Like the 14-point spread against Cavan almost seemed a little bit arbitrary, and that's kind of what it was in the end, wasn't it? Was it 14-15 in the end against Cavan? And you will always have this moment at the start where you believe that one of those teams can actually upset Dublin. I think Meath have had a good 8 minutes over the last couple of games, and Cavan kind of did the same thing. It just really hammers home how extraordinary some of those performances are to push Dublin to 70 minutes. And oftentimes it has been a replay. Those performances are just incredible from those teams to be able to do that when we see Cavan and Meath playing out of their skin to push them for 8 minutes. And we know what teams like Cavan and Meath can do to other counties that aren't Dublin as well. So I don't know. Like we can talk about the pain rankings and how we hope that it could be a classic again this weekend. Unfortunately, the most recent evidence is last year.
Well, last year, like what if Mayo interrupt that pattern at the start of the second half? Like, and that was also the end of that Mayo team, as opposed to this new Mayo team, which has enough points of difference in it. Enough youth, enough experience on the bench, so if there is a run happening, then something, I'm sure they've long debated what the right course of action is in the 38th minute when Dublin have just scored 2-1. Maybe the damage is done and the game's over and it doesn't really matter what you do at that point, but you need to do something.
One thing I would also put a little stock into that would give Mayo a bit of hope is that last year in that game, they came through another gruelling backdoor regime last year and had to beat that Armagh game on the way. I remember that being a really tough encounter. It didn't finish up until the final minute. Like, they weren't winning these backdoor games and taking off their best players with 10 minutes to go, and then they go into the Super 8s. They get creamed by Kerry first day out in the Super 8s probably because they're wrecked. Then you kind of think to yourself, well, this is curtains, and they have to bring themselves out of that hole. And on the last day of the Super 8s to actually beat a really good Donegal team in Castlebar, the effort that would have taken would have been incredible. Meanwhile, Dublin were playing their B team, a brilliant B team, but a B team all the same, up in Oma against Tyrone. And Mayo were playing their first team the night before in Castlebar against Donegal, still wrecked after their qualifier journey. So they couldn't have had the same energy reserves as Dublin did 1 week later going into that All-Ireland semi-final. And if you're talking about trying to arrest that slide in the second half, you need to have a hell of a lot of that at very least. You need to be at 100% mentally and 100% physically. And it's impossible to think that Mayo would have been 100% physically ready for that second half, because they would have just been so shattered. And they're younger this year as well. So that's one piece of empirical evidence you can point to and say that will help. And also the lack of a crowd, you can say that will help. And that's why I think it'll be a 7-point win rather than a 10-point win.
And is there any point where Dublin actually begin to doubt themselves because, you know, they haven't played in a close game in such a long period of time?
Yeah. Like, they have had the close games in the National League.
But I don't think...
Does that matter?
I mean, you can't... But no, because there's no devastation if they lose them. The jeopardy isn't there. It's like win or lose. This is a glorified training session. We know it's a glorified training session. The championship isn't.
I guess
it goes in your permanent record, as they used to say in every high school drama in the 90s.
Yeah, like there is still the fact of the draw game and the All-Ireland final replay then last year. Like, what have Mayo put up in response to that? Like, I guess Galway's comeback this year probably would have stood them in good stead. I think that was more to do with Mayo not putting them away in the first half and when they had the opportunity to do so. But it's not like Mayo have this reservoir of grinding out these incredible games, more so than Dublin. Like, I mean, Dublin had to do that in an All-Ireland final twice last year, and they did so successfully. So, I don't know, I'm not sure. Like, I also think as well, the whole non-crowd thing, if there's one team you want to be cold, calculated and ruthless as a result, it's probably going to be Dublin. And I just think that... Yeah. You almost want the crowd to distract them, or if you're talking about your idea there that they might get some bit swayed by things, you almost want 82,000 people there to do that, and it might not happen in an empty stadium. It is a bit of a shame that we're really clutching at straws here. But who knows? It kind of felt we were clutching at straws in 17, and Mayo surprised us. So maybe the same thing will happen this year.
Yeah, I mean, look, in 17, I think the issue that was that the best players still were at their peak, and they pulled the performance out. You know, I'd love to see Lee Keegan at the level on Sunday that he was at in 2017. It's a different Lee Keegan now. He's got a different job, but like equally, those old timers who are on the bench this weekend, they were still able to wrestle one last great performance in 17. So it's up to the kids this weekend who are coming through to be that next generation who actually break through the glass ceiling. And look, you know, we wish them all the very best with that. 087 9180 180 is the number. Kilkenny won the 2020 All-Ireland camogie title at the weekend. Here's their former manager, Anne Downey, and how special the win was for the county and how the team improved their physicality.
For camogie in Kilkenny, the win at the weekend was just so important, to be quite honest. You know, there's only so many times that you can ask the girls to go back to the well, and, you know, it was such a hard job, you know, for Brian to, again, you know, to go for another year. So for the camogie, you know, to stay strong and for girls to stay interested, it was really important to get the win.
Last year you hit 17 points in the final and there were 314 conceded, so it was a fairly open, free-scoring affair. This was grittier stuff on Saturday. This was a lot of fighting around the middle.
It was, and I suppose, you know, the rule change and the bit of physicality that has come into it now, I'd have to say last year we probably weren't ready for it. We didn't think it would be allowed and we didn't think it would happen, but certainly, you know, Brian and the lads had the girls really well versed. You know, their training sessions at times were probably 15 against 17 or 18, and you know, I spoke to Anne Dalton after it and she said, look, I was marking Kellyanne one night. You know, I knew all about it. He had two on her another night, so she was well ready for the battle, and it was a fierce physical encounter, but, you know, a great game.
Yeah, and totally against the pre-match predictions. Now, we did layer up on our Galway folk on Friday evening on Off the Ball, but the predictions were that Galway were going to win by 3 or 4 points. Good to see that sometimes an overwhelming favourite can be beaten in an All-Ireland final when everybody knows what the script is in advance. Again, we clutch for straws or we look for signs, Eoin?
Definitely clutching at straws with that one. Kilkenny were right in the precipice there for the last 3 years. They had also won an All-Ireland 5 years ago at this point. Like, I mean, they won the All-Ireland before losing their 3 consecutive finals.
Yeah, they knew what it takes.
They knew what it takes. Yeah.
And there was enough legends in that team who had been there and had actually already got through that glass ceiling, as we've spoken about. We had the manager, Brian Dowling, on OTB AM yesterday morning, as well as all the hurling lads. You can check that back on the OTB AM podcast. You can subscribe to that, and the best place to do that these days is, of course, on the OTB Sports app, which you can download free, gratis and for nothing from either of the app stores. Right, so a reminder, tonight's fixtures in the Premier League: Wolves against Chelsea, Man City against West Brom, Arsenal against Southampton, Leicester against Everton. And sorry, these are midweek. So Wolves, Chelsea, Man City, West Brom are tonight. Then tomorrow it's Arsenal, Southampton, Leicester, Everton, Leeds, Newcastle, Fulham, Brighton, and then the other 2 games are after that as well. So there's going to be a glut of injuries, a bunch of tired players coming the weekend too. So this is where some teams can either lay down a marker for the rest of the season, open up a bit of a gap, or actually maybe Liverpool the weekends, that Fulham game is a sign that they're there to be got at by some of the crappier teams that in the way that they haven't been in recent seasons. We'll bring you analysis and reaction to that on tomorrow's show. We also have the Tight 5 with Neil Tracy. There's a very special Christmas episode of Deal or No Deal, and we're going to preview the All-Ireland final with Kieron Donaghy, as well as talking to him about some of the rumours involving Kieron Donaghy, about him being part of Geezer's backroom team in Armagh. You would expect Justin McNulty as well sourced, so we'll see. Right now, here is Brian O'Driscoll's reaction to the World Cup draw, and reasonable and interesting and varied performances from the Irish provinces, in particular the Munster kids.
Well, there's plenty going on and off the field in rugby at the moment. Champions Cup weekend to discuss, and World Cup draw to discuss as well. Brian O'Driscoll is with us. Good evening.
Good evening, Joe. How are you?
Very well. That quarter-final ceiling looking very intact from this vantage point, I have to say. So I think everybody has seen the draw at this stage. Pool B, we're basically swapping out Japan for South Africa. So South Africa, first World Cup meeting with South Africa for Ireland. Scotland, once again, will have an Asian Pacific team and a European qualifier as well. So South Africa and Scotland in Pool B at World Cup 2023. And then in the quarter-final, it will either be New Zealand or it will be rampant France at home, presumably in the Stade de France. And all these young geniuses are now peak of their prime geniuses. So that ain't easy.
It's not. It's not. We're going to have to do it the hard way. Kind of got tones of the last World Cup as well. I remember, watching the draw and France were thrilled that they had, sorry, not France, but Japan. We obviously got Japan because we were first seed with Japan and Scotland. And we were like, gosh, what a brilliant draw. And then the realization is that on the far side is New Zealand and South Africa are to meet you in a quarter-final. So it's got shades of that. You feel as though if you can't beat Scotland, you're not winning any World Cup. So, without getting completely ahead of ourselves, you have a chance against South Africa, maybe, if you play brilliantly. Hopefully you beat Scotland. Hopefully you beat Samoa or Georgia. But then you pick up, and it could easily be New Zealand, because there's every chance that France could beat New Zealand on home patch in that opening game if they go with it. So it's going to be a very difficult route into a semi-final. But listening to Andy Farrell, he's he talked about the Rugby World Cup appetite being whet at this stage, and the juice is flowing. It's never going to be easy to get into a semi-final. It just won't be, but it's just gotten a little bit harder.
Yes. As a player then, I mean, so often, be it a Lions tour away in the distance or a World Cup draw in the distance, what do you do on a day like today? You have a look at it, you daydream for a while, and then you pack it away and forget about it in the main, I would think. Yeah,
I think you probably hope that you get the best possible route. It is important to you. Of course, you're keeping a very keen eye on it. You're not, there's no player out there couldn't care less, because the reality is, if you're going to be involved, you want the best possible route. You want to go into it feeling the minimal amount of pressure you possibly can. And from an Irish perspective, with every World Cup, it ratchets up pressure. This semi-final that's been elusive, in 10 competitions thus far. We will get there. We will, but it's not going to be easy in 2023. And it's interesting. You always get a laugh on social media, and some people are saying, "Pack it in for 2023 and start focusing on 2027." I don't think I'd go so far as to do that, because we are capable. We know now that we can beat New Zealand. Granted, everything has to go right for us. And France are going to be very, very difficult for you to get into a quarter-final to beat them on home soil. But one-off games, when that pressure is off, because I definitely won't be on us, that's for sure. If we do get to a quarter-final, we will not have heaped pressure, because the expectation will be low.
No, it's true. That is one of the very few positives out of this. Expectation will not be on their shoulders. God, 2027. Is there another burn brother? Is there like a 12-year-old who we can start giving time to now?
Listen, we're lucky that we've got what looks like some good players coming through, and let's not write off this World Cup just yet. We're in a development phase at the moment, and I think we all feel a bit sorry for ourselves, but we've talked intermittently about green shoots. It's just a matter now of putting it together and kind of building a core group of players that are definitely going to be at the next World Cup, and build a team around them. Now, you've got 3 years to do that. So there's lots of time to get things right, but other teams have lots of time as well. So let's not be panicking, or let's not be excessively positive as we were, this time, 3 years in advance of Japan World Cup. So slow and steady wins the race, and let's deal the hand that are dealt with us when it comes to playing in France.
Okay. Well, you say that now. I mean, the headline in this YouTube video will be World Cup 2023. What's the point? But we'll take your point.
But headlines are meant to grab your attention, so that will definitely do that. It's never a follow-up to the article, though, is it?
So, to matters far more serious, obviously, the last week, I still think rugby is getting to grips with this class action and the awfulness of the the interviews given by Steve Thompson and Alex Popham. And I saw you on BT Sport over the weekend, Lawrence Dallaglio alongside you in studio. I mean, God, he must look at Steve Thompson and think, how many days have I spent with him as a friend and as a player? It must have been the talk of the game. Anyone you bumped into who loves the game, it must have been shakes of the head and how awful is this kind of conversations.
It was, and it has been. Some people knew that this class action was coming, and many of us were oblivious to it. I wasn't one of the ones that received, one of these emails or letters from the lawyer in question. So I guess, listening to Bernard Jackman on his podcast, he knew it was coming. He'd received something during the summer. But thankfully, from his perspective, he was saying that there was no detrimental effect to the concussions that he'd received throughout his career. I inquired actually, with my cousin Killian Willis whether he'd been contacted, and he hadn't. So thus far, I don't know what Irish players might be. The ones that have been mentioned in that 70 players backing up these initial 8 or 10 players. So we'll have to kind of wait and see how this plays out. It's going to be long and protracted, and it might get a little bit ugly. But hopefully, in the interim, some of these commandments that they're talking about integrating into the game. Well, certainly many of them are already taking effect, but I think there's some really clever ones in there around brain scans on an annual basis. I saw Dr. Willie Stewart talking about, getting, a brain scan each year. So similar to boxing, you can get a license. So all of these things make sense, and it's got us talking about how can we further safeguards the future of the game, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do. We're not trying to abolish the game or scaremonger or frighten people away. We're trying to make it safer to allow for people to play with comfort and enjoy all the trappings of what the game does give you from a positive perspective, but reduce all the negatives. And you're going to have some negatives. That's the reality. It's a dangerous sport at times, particularly at professional level. But, amateur, grassroots, we want to make sure that people get to enjoy what hundreds of thousands, millions of people have enjoyed over the last century, the camaraderie, the friendships, the positive culture, the respect aspects, all the good stuff to take from the game, but make sure that we don't leave people with an indelible negative mark, for their post-playing days.
Two things, and then we'll get into Champions Cup. And I would, stress as well, I do have a certain sympathy for former players on here being asked medical-based questions. We generally have you on the show because you're an expert in rugby, and we're definitely crossing a line here into areas you can't profess to be an expert on, no more than I. But the two areas which jump out when it comes to this issue, one, concussions, and two, the sub-concussive knocks. So take concussions first of all. In some respects on concussions, progress is being made. So the 2019 World Cup, concussions were down 12% from the 2015 World Cup. So that's a move in the right direction. There was the high tackle sanction framework introduced, and we saw some red cards dished out for high tackles, and it seemed to have an effect. So the number of concussions is coming down. The HIA is coming back for renewed scrutiny. I think your second cousin, Dr. Barry O'Driscoll, anyway, resigned from World Rugby in 2012. Yeah. He wasn't best pleased with the HIA. And, in 2015, World Rugby issued a statement about the HIA. And it was a phrase, actually, Dr. Barry O'Driscoll referenced in a later interview in the Sunday Independent, where World Rugby had talked about how a player should be permanently removed from the pitch if there is the suspicion of a potential concussion. So the suspicion of a potential concussion. And the logic would be you're having a HIA because there is the suspicion of a potential concussion. By that logic, geez, nobody should pass a HIA. Guys can have symptoms that evening or the next morning. I suspect the HIA is going to come back under renewed scrutiny here. I think there's going to be talk now of zero tolerance policies with past HIAs.
Do you know, has that terminology changed within World Rugby? Because it's funny, I actually rang my... I don't actually even know what relation Barry is. He's my dad's first cousin, so is he an uncle once removed? I'm not even entirely sure, but we're a lot closer than the connection would suggest. So I rang him the other day and had a really long conversation just to get a sense as to where he was at, and he was very honest and open about it. And I don't feel as though he's certainly not smug about it, but I think he feels. A lot of the conversations that he was having a few years ago feel justified. But he mentioned exactly what you said there about the suspicion of a concussion. Well, if that is the case, why are there even HIAs? If that is, at all.
Maybe
yes,
I
don't. If you don't have
to your
HIAs,
question,
you will need 30 players. You'll need 15, and you'll need 15 subs, which is another issue that has been spoken about, that it feels as though there's too many changes, and so the game remains too high octane for 80 minutes, and that's why there are these continually big collisions, because there's fresh bodies. So I think you run the risk. You could have 3, 4, 5 HIAs in a game, and it could completely change the impact of. And I'm sorry, I want to explain this very well, because of course it's going to change the impact of these individuals and their brains and what actually potentially might happen to them. But it'll change the game dramatically of how you're going to implement that, and how you're going to have players coming in and out as subs in a context that we haven't seen before.
Yeah. Well, we could, as you said, we could have games where there are 8, 9, 10 substitutions. If they go zero tolerance, and that might be required.
Exactly. If you're talking about, well, that looked as though that player had a head knock, get them off. And there's going to be lots of cases where someone gets a bang, or people do get bangs on their neck, and it looks like a head collision, or they get knocked and they're fully compos mentis. But yet, if you've got zero tolerance, you'll also discourage. The visual side to that will be appalling when you see that number of substitutions. So I don't think that's the answer either. And to be honest with you, I don't know what the in between is.
Yes, yeah. No, same. So look, there's that's one, and then the second one is the sub concussions. So I'll try not to drone on for too long here, but there's just some points to make and throw at you. And ultimately the question is going to be, what can we do to drastically bring down the number of sub concussive dings to the head? So. Alex Popham, for instance, and I heard him interviewed on the 5 Live podcast during the week, and all that early onset dementia means is that you're under the age of 65. He's 41. The symptoms are no more benign. In a 15-minute interview, he lost his train of thought 3 or 4 times. Just had to say, I've forgotten what I was saying, sorry, and they had to pick up the interview again. It was stark, to say the least. So his lawyer reckons that Alex Popham had about 50 sub-concussive knocks to the head per game. So tackles, rucks, clear-outs of breakdowns, per game is what he reckoned, the lawyer.
Wow.
Now, the lawyer's not a disinterested party, obviously, and is part of this case, but that was what he said. There was a quote from him in the Sunday Times, for instance. He was saying, if the likes of Alex had to make 50 contacts, then I reckon, and he names a current player, actually, and I'm not going to repeat that current player's name, I don't think that's fair. But he says, if the likes of Alex had to make 50 contacts, then I reckon that X now would be up to about 70 today. And if each of those little dings in the head is causing blood vessels in your brain to leak, then you extrapolate that over a 15-year career, these guys are retiring with hundreds of thousands of sub-concussions. And it's, one, how much damage are these doing? And the evidence suggests certainly plenty of damage. Like there was a Boston University study 2 years ago of former players who were exhibiting symptoms of brain trauma, and 20% of those players had never been diagnosed with a concussion in their life. They'd never been concussed, and yet they had, as a result, we presume, of all these subconcussive traumas, massive issues, huge issues, akin to what the likes of Popham has and Steve Thompson has. And I was listening to Danny Kerr as well, and this is the final point I'll wrap up on. So Danny Kerr was talking, and there's a new mouth guard now, and I think Quins are using it in training, which can measure how much force you're taking, And Kerr was telling the story on the 5 Live podcast that he was in training, and he thought it was a routine enough training session, and the guys came up to him on the side of the pitch afterwards and said, you've taken a lot of punishment here in this session, you've taken 4 big enough blows. And he was kind of thinking, have I? And on reflection, it was him taking the ball to the line, last minute pass, and then tackle and kind of whiplash effect. And there's a force in that. So the question is, if these sub-concussive hits are causing this damage, and at the moment, rugby has to be very, very afraid that they likely are, how do you eliminate them from the cut and thrust of a game? How do we have rucks? How do we have tackles? How does the game proceed with a degree of caution that the current generation are being looked after? That is the very scary question for rugby, because I mean, the answer there is a radical change to how the game is played.
My answer to that, Joe, would be I don't know if that is the case. And that's the first time I've heard of that level of detail. And I do think there's a huge amount more science that we need to hear and have relayed to us, and we need to hear more experts. I've read a lot about different studies that have taken place. Willie Stewart in Glasgow, Dr. Willie Stewart, and his findings, and a lot of what he's talking about is obviously is changing the game dramatically, but it's obviously changing how we currently see it as being acceptable to just unacceptable, like zero tolerance on high tackles. Some of these ruck clear outs that at the moment we think are acceptable, maybe they're the ones that are causing issues. And so from a scientific point of view, I don't know enough detail to give an informed decision on it as to how you modify the game to make sure that these don't continue, but also to maintain the game in its current form or close to its current form. The reality is it has always been quite gladiatorial, and maybe that terminology is not the terminology we need to use either. I saw a BBC article earlier about Bill Sweeney over there, the RFU chief exec, saying that maybe we need to look at some of the language we're using, talking about brutality. And Eddie Jones is one that's that's been a big driver of that as to how England kind of marked their territory about being brutally punishing. And maybe those are tactics that we need to look at changing if we're looking to encourage younger players, new generations come through, because maybe they'll be turn-offs. I don't know. I think so much of this is going to play out in the coming weeks and months, and I feel as though I personally am going to become massively informed. I've been guilty in the past, and I'm not ashamed to admit it, that I've made reference to the game's going a little bit soft, or how is this being penalised 2-3 years ago when we started seeing the high shots. And I have to say, I've had a full rethink, and the reality of where, besides the Steve Thompson and Alex Potton situation, we need to take care of our players. And prior to that, I felt, gosh, I shouldn't have been using those sort of terms and phrases. I'm someone that maybe people are listening to. I've got to be, I've got to be looking at trying to help the game and the evolution of the game in a positive way. And those sort of comments, I don't think help anyone, particularly if we're looking at protecting players. So it feels as though I don't know the answer to your initial question, but I think we're going to discover an awful lot more about the game in the next 6 to 8 months, and hopefully we can find a path via World Rugby and see what their lead dictates. We have to make sure that we don't bury our head in the sand in this, because you will see the game vanishing as a result if we do.
Yes, yeah. And to be fair to you, I haven't seen anybody come up with a good solution. This is how the game can be played, and it will meet the threshold which guarantees the safety of the current batch.
Yeah.
And the other problem is you don't know for another 10-15 years until the next batch hit 45-50 how they're fixed is the terrible problem as well.
I am a huge advocate for rugby. I'm a huge fan because of what it gave me. If I wasn't playing professionally or internationally, I'd have been playing with my friends because of the underage values and the enjoyment that I got from it. And so the last thing I want to be doing is coming on and bashing it and scrutinising it where it might drag out some negatives, but I don't want to be disingenuous to the facts that we are actually finding put to us. So it's trying to find a happy medium to honour the issues that have happened in the last kind of 10-15 years and look for change, but also try and hang on to all the great aspects of what rugby has offered so many people.
We'll come back to it, I'm sure, again, many times over the next couple of years, I suspect. Champions Cup then, so Ulster beaten by Toulouse on Friday, but it was a really good game. Leinster bonus point win in Montpellier, and Northampton already talking about resting players for the trip to Dublin on Saturday, by the way, so that's just, Leinster off to a great start. Connacht gave a brilliant account of themselves in La Défense yesterday, especially in the second half, and then Munster beat Harlequins. So to work our way back, I know you were doing the Munster Quins game. Actually, sorry, well, I know we've just left the topic of player welfare, but maybe just to round it off, Eoin van Graan very unhappy with the late hits on Ben Healy, who came on. Quite clearly a tactic to hit him late, said van Graan. Certain things in the game are just unacceptable. He's now injured because of it. Healy came on, made a bit of an impact.
That this morning.
Yeah, so he was.
I read that.
Right, okay. And could you? I mean, was it obvious to you when you're watching it? He was taking some late punishment, and this was very. You know, they had identified the 21-year-old out half.
Well, they'd obviously talked about it during the week. You know, there's this young guy that's coming. Has broken onto the scene, and we'll probably see him at some stage. What do you do to, any new player coming in? If it's a fullback or a winger, you put high balls up on them and you try and test them out early. And I suppose from a 10 point of view, because of the type of player that Healy is, he's brave and he takes the ball to the line and he's happy to take a little bit of punishment. So I guess maybe they spoke during the week of making sure that he knew that defenders were there. And, at least twice they overstepped the mark. Alex Dombrandt, their number 8, hit him with a no-arm tackle, late, and it was the easiest yellow card that any referee will have. And then another time, Joe Marler threw a little shot in on him that was just enough to it was kind of the margin between penalty and yellow card. I think it would have probably, on the scale of yellow cards, would have appeared to have been quite unfair, and quite severe. So he got away with it, but I don't know which one of them, on which one of those collisions he got injured. But he got up and knocked over a 55-metre penalty after one of them. So he's made of stern stuff, but if he's injured now and doesn't get to play next week, that's a great shame. And we do need to protect our players, and maybe we need to have slightly stricter sanctions for players targeting new guys on the block as well. I know you can't specify for individual, but the expectation is with coaches that referees will look after players. And the problem is, if you're going to have cheap shots like that, you'll have players taking things into their own hands as well, and we don't want that either. But it is a shame that he's potentially not going to be fit for Claremont next week, because there's calls for him starting. JJ was okay. But he looks really good, and I think he's going to be the future of Munster. Why not play him in one of these big games and see how he gets on?
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.